Welcome to Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup. I'm your host, Jason Bland, and tonight we have first-time guests, Dan Baldwin and George Sewell. Dan Baldwin has written 3 books, the Paranormal Pendulum books. He uses the pendulum, is skilled in the art of the pendulum use to basically ascertain information from the other side. Realms of consciousness. I'm a big, actually, believer in the pendulum. I've experimented with it back in the day and seen it do some crazy stuff. So definitely keep your open mind to this. And George Sewell's paranormal investigator. They both looked into. Are you familiar? We've debated about this show on Paranormal Soup, but the Netflix series Haunted. Have you seen it? We talked about it on the show about a couple different episodes, especially one where we were like, "Is that real? Is this real?" Well, it is real, people. I've known a few of those cases now. I think they're on their 3rd season. I know that they do get real stories, real people on that show Haunted. As credible as they are, and this is one of them. They investigated the Lindsey Higgins case from season 1, episode 5, and that's the alien abduction one, if you remember. It was really good. And Lindsay's story is incredible, but I'll tell you what, there's always so much more to the story than what you get in those kind of episodes. And Dan and George investigated this. They're going to share a lot of that tonight. Plus, we'll get into the, I know Dan does missing persons, a lot of different stuff. We're going to go deep down the rabbit hole, I'm sure, tonight with these 2 wonderful guests. And of course, I got a lot of weird to get to in the World Wide Web of Weird. We will get to that. And we'll have open phone lines later in the show. You can call in, ask Dan and George questions, or share your own experience. I know I'm really interested. Anybody from Shreveport, Louisiana, Lindsey Higgins' case took place there. And apparently there's been a lot of people that experienced what she did in Shreveport at the time. I think there's certain areas in the world where they have alien abductions happen in certain towns and nobody's telling each other. We got to all start talking to figure this stuff out. I'm going to get all that weird stuff tonight. All right, let's go ahead and get rolling on into it. Welcome to another night of Paranormal Soup. I'm your host, Jason Bland, as I said before. I'm totally screwing up my intro line. Tonight's guests, Dan Baldwin and George Sewell, will be joining us after the World Wide Web of Weird and after our first commercial break. Joining me, as always, is my beautiful co-host, Jamie D. How you doing tonight, Jamie?
Doing well, thank you. How are you doing?
Doing good. Spending the weekend at home alone. Kids are actually on their first camping trip without me. I had to work. They also got to fire their first guns. My gun that my wife took down there with a firearms instructor. Got to show them how to use a gun. And I'm jealous. I wish I could have gone first camping trip and their first time firing a gun. I didn't get to be there. Oh. But, I work retail, so that's the life of retail, Labor Day weekend. Yay. Join me, as always, from saying I was in Florida, where I wish I was, if it wasn't with my, or with my family, is Rob Autry himself. How you doing tonight, Rob?
Home alone. I'm not home
alone. No. Hopefully not. You might get abducted. We're going to talk about alien abduction tonight, but Rob, tonight, you saw a UFO maybe.
Maybe, I don't know. We were debating on what it was.
Yeah, you just got this, how long ago when was it tonight?
An hour ago.
So, like, hot off the presses. Do you think you got it uploaded to share tonight?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll try, because I do have some UFO stuff tonight in the World Wide Web Weird. We'll talk about it after that, maybe. But we got to make it quick, so we got a lot to get to in the World Wide Web Weird. So let's go ahead and roll. Let me say it one more time. The World Wide Web of Weird. Tonight on the World Wide Web of Weird, I thought I'd start out with about something I'm a big advocate of us going to space. I know people don't like Elon Musk. I do like his enthusiasm to traveling to Mars. I think we need to get our butts on the moon. It's going to be a while before we get to Mars, but I think this is an interesting development. I got the article from Tim Bindle from Coast to Coast. It's a little bit shorter than the one I'm sharing here. Instruments aboard the Perseverance rover successfully produce oxygen on Mars. So now we definitely know there's possibility we can actually make oxygen generators on Mars. And I want to say a big thank you to a childhood friend and listener of the show, Russ Harmon, for his $20 donation on Super Chat. Don't forget, you can donate on Super Chat. Any amount helps go to the bills of the show. Thank you, Russ. But let's go ahead and get into the weird. All right, so first up, let me get the share screen up. Let me see. There we go. Okay. So, this first one here is in a promising development when it comes to possibly future colonization of Mars. A device employed by the Perseverance rover has successfully produced oxygen on the red planet. According to a press release, the Mars Oxygen Institute Resource Utilization Experiment, MOXIE, is a small cube-shaped instrument which converts carbon dioxide found in the Martian atmosphere into oxygen. Last year, researchers tested the additive device 7 times in a variety of atmospheric conditions, including during the day and night, and through different Martian seasons, no matter the circumstances, the instrument was able to produce approximately 6 grams of oxygen every hour, which is the equivalent of what is a small tree would exhale here on Earth. This is the first demonstration of actually using resources of the surface of another planetary body and transforming them chemically into something that would be useful for a human mission, marveled MIT's Jeffrey Hoffman, who leads the MOXIE research. It's historic in that sense, with the proverbial proof of concept having been achieved. NASA envisions eventually dispatching a much larger version of the instrument to the red planet. See, we still got a long ways to go, but this is a big step. We got to make oxygen. We got to breathe. I remember the old Adam West movie where he goes to Mars. I forget what's the name of that movie. I loved it as a kid. It was a 1960s movie of Adam West, and like crash lands on Mars, and he's able to produce oxygen by burning the rocks. 1960s sci-fi, but I loved it. All right, let's move on. I think that's a big story for us. We got to get this stuff figured out before we go there. I know Elon Musk wants to be sending people, but how are they going to breathe, man? All right, and eat. We know that too. We're working on all that. All right, so this next one, talking about UFOs, we're going to show this, and then let's see, Rob, we can talk about your, just an hour ago, hot off the presses UFO sighting, but this is something we've talked about this case, and now the footage has come out from 2018. Footage from the USS Zumwalt mystery drone swarm incident released. Obtained through Freedom of Information Act request by the War Zone, the intriguing footage pertains to an incident that occurred on April 24th, 2019, around 8:30 p.m. Pacific time. The U.S. Zumwalt, an advanced U.S. Navy destroyer, had been situated 17 nautical miles from the Marine Corps base at Camp Pendleton when it found itself being buzzed by up to 6 unidentified unmanned aerial vehicles, which reached heights of up to 1,000 feet. So go ahead and play a little bit of this, just a little bit.
This is USS Zumwalt at approximately
just mute it.
On April
it's
20.
Too loud. But yeah, you can see this. This is from the War Zone, from a Freedom of Information Act. This is what they're talking about, drones. You know, this is out at sea. This isn't some, commercial end drone, I don't think. What are your thoughts, Rob?
I don't know. I mean, the light pattern of it, it could be a drone because they're usually, forward-legged like that. But I don't know. I don't know.
What I find interesting is in the video, see that green light there right above the play button?
Mm-hmm.
You'll watch that green light, and it goes from green and changes to blue.
Hmm.
So whatever kind of lighting that is, it's able to change color. Because if you watch that light, it's probably hard to see for people on here. For the Warzone, you can find this at the Warzone YouTube channel. The Drive is, I think, also maybe, but the Warzone YouTube channel, you can see this. You watch that green light. Maybe it's just the camera adjusting or whatever, but you watch the green light, it turns from green to blue. I don't know.
Yeah.
Not your normal lights I think you would see on a drone.
Yeah, it's weird.
All right. So that came out. We've talked about it in line. We never got to really see the footage. It's very drone-like more than UFO, but maybe it's a UFO, but it's not very big. I think that's why they say drone. It's not very big, but boy, there's some bright lights if you want to be secret too. I don't understand. It all confuses me. Like if you want to be secret, you turn all the lights off on the drone. Why flash the lights? Why do all of that? None of it makes sense to me. I get enemies spying on us with drones and what we're doing with our ships out there in the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. But you would think they would have any lights on their drones. It'd be all quiet, and they would, try not till they're there. Okay, go. Let's get hot off the presses. St. Augustine, Florida. Rob hopefully can play this video shot from his car.
Yeah, it's it was like, we're just driving home and we just saw these orange lights, and I'm like, are those Chinese lanterns or are those the typical,
right?
All
right, well, let me get it up. Hold on. Add to stream. There we go.
Got music. My radio's playing.
Yeah, don't play that.
And it's flashing. That's lightning that was flashing.
Yeah.
So that's one of them. At first I thought those are planes, but they're orange. They're not red and green. And
yeah.
Let me get the other one here.
Looks like it's way up there, but I don't know.
Yeah, they were pretty far up.
You said you got another one?
Yeah.
All right. I love this. Live on Paranormal Soup. This was shot an hour ago. Hot off the presses. I know. I love it. You almost forgot to tell me right before we went live. I'm like, what?
Oh, yeah. Forgot about that.
You can't forget about that. The aliens made you forget. It's possible. Yeah, this is the one I saw that you showed me.
Yeah, and that's lightning.
A lot of UFOs are spotted with thunderstorms a lot of times.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
I don't know. We were sitting there watching it for, 5 or 10 minutes, and it was like, there was a couple of them at first. We saw 2 of them, and then one of them, disappeared, and then we saw another one come over. So we were wondering, maybe they're Chinese lanterns.
In the middle of a storm? I don't know, maybe.
I don't know.
This is out over the ocean.
Well, actually, the ocean, this would be over the intercoastal waterway. They were
intercoastal. Yeah.
They were coming from the ocean side. So I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I didn't get video of the 2 because, it's like that same thing. You're like, holy crap, look at that. And like,
wait, I have a phone.
Yeah. You're too amazed looking at it, but actually grab the phone and.
Well, let's go on to the next one, because somebody in Mexico used their phone for photos. They didn't do video. I would love to have seen video of this craft, but this is photos. This next one should be Article 3. Recently released photos show a quintessential flying saucer over Mexican state Tamaulipas. I think
you got to share it again up there.
Yep. Sorry. Thank you.
Oh yeah, this one.
I have a number of photos of this for a reason. Mexico has certainly seen this fair share of UFO sightings over the years. Mexico City, in particular, has often been considered a hot spot for phenomenon, especially following a spate of sightings that were reported over the city at the time of solar eclipse back in the 1990s, which I remember that. The last sightings, which come courtesy of an individual named Juanito Juan, reportedly occurred over Mexican state of, I don't know how you say this, Tamaulipas?
Yeah. Good luck with that one.
Yeah, on August 17th. The witness took several photographs at the time showing a reflective metallic disc-shaped object. The photographs are good if it's real, if this isn't hijinks. I don't know. I'm not an expert. But I got a couple of them. So this one is just high, just like at a straight angle. And I have a zoom in, I think, of it too. But then he takes two photos.
We
one where
looked
it's
at
just
this
like flat.
Wednesday.
Yeah. And what you're saying?
And we had noticed the way that the light was reflecting off the top of it kind of went with the light up in the
Yeah, I thought
clouds.
that
And then
too.
we had zoomed in to see how it kind of pixeled out. And then we checked that against the dishes down on the bottom. And then I think you ended up sending it to Todd, right?
I
Yeah, what did
forgot
Todd
to
say?
send it to Todd.
I would love to know
Yeah.
Todd, our
Yep.
Oh, you never
president
did?
a-holes.
See,
No.
Todd was going to look at it because we thought it looked, pretty good. We couldn't tell.
Yeah.
We thought maybe it was
Yeah.
a small picture that they had cropped out and then stretched and put on, but the dish kind of has that same.
Yeah. Like,
What I find interesting is that the second pictures, it's at an angle. It like tilts up.
Yeah.
And what it reminds me is the Bob Lazar stuff about the technology is that to go to space, it has to do this tilt up thing, basically.
Yep.
Like the way that it has to configure the anti-gravity or something like that. I don't know.
And that's what that's doing?
Yeah, it looks like, it does, it's like straight, and then the next picture he has, it's like tilting up. It's probably right before it would have taken off, I bet.
Yeah, if it's real, it's a good one. It's one of the most clear ones.
But yeah, those are the ones I suspect.
If that's real, that's like how to be best.
I don't know. I feel hijinks could be involved. I don't know. But like I said, I'd love to hear Todd's opinion.
Yeah,
the lighting
definitely.
looks good. The lighting looks good.
Yeah, if it's fake, they did a good job doing it.
He's going to run it through some.
All right, well, let's move on to some Bigfoot stuff since we've covered some UFOs. And we're going to get into alien abductions with our guests, Dan Baldwin and George Sewell, tonight. This next one, I've seen a number of people. I got this Unexplained Mysteries article on it, but I've seen Coast to Coast. Others cover this. But Yahoo News even. I got the Yahoo News article in the picture, covered it. 2 Bigfoot sightings reported in South Carolina this summer. That are making the rounds. Something strange is roaming the wilderness of South Carolina. At least that is, if these 2 witnesses' reports, both involving encounters that occurred over the summer, are to be believed. The first of which occurred July 5th was reported by a forestry worker who had driven out to a remote part of York County to investigate a power line cut around 2 p.m. He thought something was up when he came across a strange depression in the grass, as though a large animal had been lying there, as well as a strong foul smell. He then heard what sounded like something large knocking on a tree trunk a short distance away, followed by a correlating series of knocks on another tree trunk in the opposite direction. Could he have stumbled upon 2 Bigfoots communicating with one another? The question. The second report, which occurred in Beaufort County on August 2nd, saw a family drive out to visit, and this one's interesting, a lighthouse at Huntington Island State Park when they encountered something unexpected. They had been driving along the exit road around noon when they spotted a creature walking upright along the side of the road, which promptly disappeared into the foliage. The height of the creature is estimated as being between 5 to 6 feet tall, the report states. The legs were approximately 3 feet long, human-like jointed knees with dark brown, splotchy black hair that was approximately 2 inches long. All 3 passengers witnessed the same thing and were unable to explain what it was. They even reported it to the Huntington Island State Park office and were told that an investigation would be initiated. Whether experiences were actually looked into, however, remains unclear. I find the last one really interesting because it was only 5 to 6 feet, so it could have been a person in a suit would be the first question. But if it isn't a person in a suit, then is this a juvenile Bigfoot, or are we talking about skunk ape kind of deal where it's a smaller version of Bigfoot? I don't know. 3 witnesses is great. I think that makes it much more credible when you got 3 people willing to go on record with the state park officials to say they saw this. I think that's great. To me, that's more credible when they're not just posting something on the internet. They went to state officials to even, to do this, and more power to them for telling what they saw. Because if there really is a creature like this out there, or a dumb-butt in a suit trying to freak people out, they need to look into it. Yeah. Either way, So I like that story. We got to move on. We're running out of time. Shoot. All right, got another Bigfoot one. This one, I don't know. I got the article. I'm going to read from Coast to Coast because it's shorter, by Tim Binnell. A parapeculiar instance in a British coastal community has left some wondering if a Bigfoot of all creatures might be roaming a beach in the area. The rather unique case reportedly began last weekend when an unnamed witness, unnamed, was walking along the sands dunes in Norfolk when he spotted this thing, which he estimated stood 15 feet tall. That's pretty damn big, and boasted a brawny body, which he likened to Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'll be back. Get to the chopper. We got to get all the quotes in there, right? After a brief stare down, the man says the creature bounded off across the dunes into the pines forest. When the witness recounted the sighting to his friends, they just laughed at me and told me I should get some glasses. However, another beachgoer in the area stumbled upon something which may add credence to the man's account. On the following Monday, Clemmy Long was walking her dog along a beach in the Holcomb National Nature Reserve when the pooch led her to a pair of sizable prints, which I have up here. When I saw them, I couldn't believe it. Is marveled that they must be 5 times the size of a human footprint. I don't want to run out of time here, but I don't know. You can go find this on Coast to Coast, and then this original article, I forgot who had it, and they have the different pictures of the prints. I mean, Bigfoot, 15 foot tall, is pretty going to be saw in the woods. I don't think that's going to win the hiding contest. That's a pretty big dent. And these feet prints, I should have put the footprints. I should have put the other picture up because there's one that has the 2 prints. I don't know if I had another picture in there. I might just have the one. It has like 2 prints, but they're like really close together. I'm like, this thing would be 15 feet big. Those big of prints, they're huge. Its stride would have to be a lot bigger than that, I would think. And there's only 2 prints. This thing would be leaving prints everywhere with that much body weight, I would think. Yeah. Especially on a beach. It ain't going to be tiptoeing around. It's got to be over 1,000 pounds.
Yeah.
And I would think it'd make a lot bigger impression in that sand. So something seems up on this one. I really like the other Bigfoot story because it had 3 witnesses. Yeah, they don't have any pictures. They were just out in the woods. They don't describe your typical Bigfoot height-wise. They say 5 to 6 feet, Yeah. And 3 people came forward. I mean, this is interesting that one person comes out anonymously and says they saw this, and then another person suddenly, I found footprints. I don't know. I'm not saying it couldn't be a Bigfoot, but I feel shenanigans are about on that one. All right, we're gonna run out of time here.
Pretty big.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of shenanigans, this one's got a lot of people on the internet in an uproar. There's the other. See how close those prints are together?
Yeah.
See that? Yeah, it just doesn't seem right. Okay, next up, before we run out of time, I don't know if I'll even have time to read the whole article to you. I'll have to maybe give you a short explanation. Exorcism at Bible camp sparks outrage. A Bible camp in Canada is under fire after a staff member performed an exorcism on a teenage attendee and left those who witnessed the ritual shaken by the unsettling experience. The very weird incident, which came to light this week, reportedly occurred back in July as Redberry Bible Camp in the province of Saskatchewan, following several days in which the staff member, Carlos Storkson, said to have cautioned the children that they could be possessed by demons at any moment. His words of warning reached a scenario when one of the when one of the boys suffered a nosebleed and began convulsing on the floor. Rather than provide medical attention for the youngster, the man set about performing an exorcism on the troubled teen. Following the ritual, the self-described apostle went so far as to hand out business cards, yes he did, to the campers with the caveat that he was the only one person who could cast out demons for them. As one might imagine, the teens who watched the exorcism unfold were unnerved by what they saw, and shortly afterwards, 4 of the boys went so far as to call their parents in the middle of the night, begging them to take them home. There's more to this article. Coast to Coast, Tim Binnell has a sum up, but it's really quickly on this one. One, I know people that we've had on the show that do not exorcisms, okay, deliverances usually. I mean, exorcism actually, a Catholic Roman exorcism is a different. 2, all of them I know, if they saw somebody convulsing in the floor and nosebleed, wouldn't go immediately to, you're being demon possessed. They would get medical help and attention. I wouldn't have anybody in the show that thought otherwise if I thought they thought otherwise. This guy, there are people who believe in the power of exorcism or, I just said it, deliverance ministries, and I'm not to question that. What I question is people like this giving it a really bad name by doing stupid stuff like this with other people's children.
Yeah.
If you think it's a demon, fine. Do your little prayer or whatever, but you call for medical help. So whatever they throw at this guy, he deserves it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's crazy. You had a kid convulsing on the floor. I don't care if you believe in demons or not. That's fine. But in all end, you need medical attention. This kid needs medical attention.
Zach with the comment. This one time at Bible camp.
Oh, yeah, of course that was coming. I got possessed by a demon. Okay. All right, let's move on. I got run out of time here. And tonight we're going to talk with Dan Baldwin and George Sewell. Dan, I know, is a pendulum user and does missing person cases. And I love it when people are able to put these abilities and find missing people or missing pets, like this psychic did in Colorado. Psychic used in search for missing dog found after 11 days in Colorado forest. It was 11 days of absolute panic, said the owner of the pup, that was found after more than a week of being lost in Colorado backcountry. The morning of August 11th, Mary Francis, a real estate agent from Blue River, was coincidentally interviewing a dog watcher when two of her pit bulls bolted out her front door. Blue River is a small mountain town located roughly 6 miles south. We're going to run out of time. I don't have time to read this whole article, but basically, after 11 days, she was really out of hope, and she contacted a psychic in her area, who basically led her right to her dog, found her dog.
That's cool.
And that is awesome. And people don't believe in the abilities that people can do or find stuff, but there are many cases of people's pets and loved ones being found by a psychic. There is something to it. And, I know enough that law enforcement officials have, given it credence and worked with them over the years. I'm not saying that's exactly what your hope should be in if somebody you love goes missing, or a pet, because they're just as much a family member as your other family members. Do what you need to do to try to find them. Don't rely on just a psychic. But if you're out of hope, and somebody's got a good reputation, go to them. Maybe they might help. Yeah. 11 days, I would have been losing hope pretty quick for my animals. 11 days is horrible. Sorry. Oh, that's it for the World Wide Web of Weird. It went quick. We had the live. I had interrupted with some with the live video, or not live, but the hot off the presses video UFO footage from St. Augustine, Florida, from Rob. I love that. Thank you, Rob. But that's it. Our guests tonight are going to join us after the commercial break. Dan Baldwin, George Sewell, author of the Paranormal Pendulum Volumes 1 through 3 books. We're going to talk about the Lindsey Higgins case, if you're familiar with it, from the show Haunted on Netflix. It's an alien abduction case. I can't wait to talk to these guys tonight. We had a great guest last week on alien abduction, so we're going to continue this kind of theme tonight when we come back from the short commercial break.
Join us every Wednesday night at midnight Eastern Standard Time for Weird Wednesday, the live stream, with your hosts Jamie, the Living Dead Girl, and Rob, the Phantom, where we'll talk about all things paranormal, including zodiac, astrology, tarot card and oracle card readings, live ghost boxing and spirit communication, where we'll do Voices from Beyond, the Cold Case Files. So we hope you join us live on Facebook and YouTube every Wednesday night at midnight Eastern Standard Time. We hope to see you there. Bye-bye.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Of the second kind, physical evidence of a UFO. Close encounters of the third kind, contact. From Steven Spielberg, the director of Jaws, comes one of the most ambitious and unusual films ever made. And what you will see has never been seen before. It's a cosmic mystery crossing what many scientists believe will be the next threshold of human experience. It is called Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It begins in an Indiana town and leads to one inescapable conclusion. We are not alone. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Certificate A. Now showing at the Odeon, Leicester Square.
The international chart-topping, Haunted Horror of Haverfordwest has been described as terrifyingly real, a must-read, shocking and chilling brilliance, genuinely worrying, utterly frightening. Don't read before bed. Described as one of the spookiest writers out there, best-selling author G.L. Davies presents Haunted Horror of Haverfordwest, the true paranormal account that is shocking the world. Dare you enter? Dare you read? Haunted Horror of Haverfordwest is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, and wherever books are sold. Pray you never have to live there.
This is the sound of a space clock aboard a U.S. satellite 180 miles above the Earth. No one winds up this timepiece. It's powered by a tiny battery, a battery that delivers power for years without replacement. Now the same type of battery, the Duracell battery, can bring new reliability and long life to your battery-operated equipment. Radios, cameras, toys, all run far longer. Duracell batteries, the long-distance power cells, outlast any ordinary battery. The same type of battery that keeps space clocks running for years can bring long life to anything powered by batteries. Dura, as in durable. Cell, as in power cell. The Duracell battery, made by Mallory.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from Talkstream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Switch to DCS ranging.
240, nominal to profile.
We're in the pipe, 5 by 5.
Tonight on Paranormal Soup, our guests are Dan Baldwin and George Sewell. Dan is a professional writer, often a ghostwriter for other professionals. He has written or co-written or ghosted for more than 50 books and has won numerous local, regional, and national awards. He's a certified clinical hypnotherapist, plays a Native American flute, and is an expert pendulum dowser, having using the pendulum to assist in finding missing persons for over 15 years. George Sewell is the author of Habits, Patterns, and Thoughts That Go Bump in the Night, A Gnome, A Candle in Me, Just the Facts Please About Alcohol and Drug Abuse, co-author Dan Baldwin, and the novels Chrysamere and A Turn at the Point. He's a playwright. He was written for the community theater, college theater, and dinner theaters, for which he has been awarded Louisiana Division of Arts Fellowship in the Theater Playwriting. Vocationally, he is retired as a counselor, program manager, and administrator in the field of addictive disorders, including the problems of gambling. Both Dan and George, if you're familiar with, and we've talked about this Netflix series on this show before, is Haunted on Netflix, investigated, if you remember from season 1, episode 5, Lindsey Higgins abduction case. And I've really been waiting for this show tonight because I've watched a lot of those episodes of Haunted, not Haunted. And we've all questioned, are they real? Are these real cases? I know they are. I know some of the cases later on than some of the seasons are real cases I know of. This is a real, they're all real, and this is a real case we're going to be talking about that both these men have investigated. And I'll tell you what, they don't show you so much of the story, especially, I know that. I don't have anybody have to tell me when I see somebody being interviewed about alien abduction, because I've interviewed many people now on alien abduction. The interviews they give for TV spots like that and shows never cover even nowhere near the whole picture, even just a little teeny bit of the picture. There's so much more that goes on in an alien abduction case, especially one that's been going on since childhood. There's so much more to it than you can capture or they'll allow you to talk about on a TV show. So I'm really excited to have these guests on. We will open up the phone lines later in the show. Please, if you've had alien abduction experiences, I know some of you guys called in last week. Feel free to call in again. Share with our guests. They've investigated these things. We got to start sharing our stories to make sense of all the weirdness that is of these kind of encounters. But let's go ahead and get to our guest. All right. Well, hopefully we're all right here. I got to add them both to the stream. Oh, Dan, George. How you guys doing tonight? Dan, and then Dan on the right for me and George on the left. I don't know how that comes across for the audience. Welcome to the show, guys. I've seen the Lindsey Higgins episode a couple times. We're going to get into all that tonight. I'm sure some of our audience has seen it too. We actually debated on Open Line tonight when that season first came out for Haunted about, is this show real? Because there was one episode in particular, not the Lindsey Higgins one, but one where it was involved two sisters and a serial killer's parents. And I'm like, this just seems so outlandish, but these are all real cases. And Lindsey Higgins is one. And yeah, it's dramatized and Netflix does its thing with the show, but it is real. And like I said, I you can correct me if I'm wrong, but usually as I know alien abduction cases, there's so much more to it than what they'll put in a TV show.
Putting it mildly.
Yeah.
It's something, one of the things I have to say, we're going to get into your guys' backgrounds tonight, but I just want to start off. One of the reasons I love that episode is because one thing that Lindsey says in that episode that really struck a chord, because I'm trying to deal with some past memories and things that have happened to me, is that she can't see their faces. And that's something I've experienced.
Yeah.
With what I'm trying to deal with, is I can see the bodies, but I can't see the faces. And I found that really interesting. We're going to get into that tonight. Let's start out with you, Dan. You are the pendulum
Correct.
guy. I've had a lot of I experimented a lot with pendulums when I was in my early 20s, and was amazed by what they do. I was actually in a really haunted home my cousin lived in and watched a pendulum go like this and hang in the air. I don't know how long, but long enough for all of us to open our mouths and go, what the hell, and then drop.
Yeah.
So ever since then, I've been convinced of the power of the pendulum. What got you started as a pendulum and dowsing, I guess, user, or how you want to call it?
Yeah, it's an interesting story, and I was kind of brought into it very late in life. In my books, I describe myself as a psychic on training wheels.
That's a good way to put it with a pendulum, I guess.
So I'm still quite a learner at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But I started when I was about 22 years ago. And out of the blue one night, I was walking around my neighborhood. And I'm not a clairaudient, but I clearly heard a voice that said, "Find missing children." It was like a command. And I did one of those numbers. There were no cars driving by. There were no windows open where a TV was playing. There was nobody in the park where I was, and that thought would not let go. I mean, it was almost like a commandment. It just stuck in the back of my head, and after about 3 months, it would not go away. So I did the basic step. Show me the door, I'll go through it. And it hit me out of the blue. I had always heard that there was a psychic strain in my family. And looking back, I can see that in my life now, but at the time I did not recognize it. And I said, well, I'm not a trained investigator. I'm not a cop. I'm not a private detective. I have no experience except my reporting experience. So maybe this psychic thing is something I can do to go find missing children. I started hanging around some psychics and some psychic bookstores, and finally I saw a wonderful lady with one of these things,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, "Hey, I can do that! Wow!" And so I picked up the pendulum and pretty much am self-taught. Started using it and found that the darn thing works. That works very well. And so I started working missing person cases. That led into several years of contact with the spirit world, and that led into George and I contacting the people out there in the spaceships.
I know we're going to get deep down the rabbit hole tonight, with especially the Lindsey Higgins case.
Yeah.
But I wanted people to first to hear about, because they're going to hear about how you guys use the pendulum to communicate tonight.
Mm-hmm.
But I want people to open their minds, so people are like, oh, whatever, pendulum use. I know this as being a paranormal investigator, because I experimented with the pendulum and that, but then I joined a paranormal investigation group, and some people use the pendulum, and there'd be other investigators that just snub their nose at it. And I can see the skeptics' reasons for disliking the pendulum or having issues with it, but I've seen it do some. Like I said, I saw it float in midair, float up and hang. I mean, I've experimented with myself. I've felt you feel the power through it. You can feel the power.
Yeah.
You can feel the connection. And we used it to do games just to test it out, where we'd hide something and then ask the pendulum to lead us to it where it is in the house. And it would every time.
Yeah, if you do it right, it's incredibly accurate. I'll be the first to admit that I'm not 100%. I
don't think anybody can be
way off. But when I'm cooking, I'm pretty good at it. And so it's so simple. Anybody can pick it up. The technique. The hard part is keeping your mind open and keeping yourself focused, so that you don't create your own answers.
That's true. I mean, one of the things skeptics throw out there about the pendulum is it's the micro muscles in your fingers that are affecting it, even your subconscious is. And that makes sense. They're not wrong. But I think our subconscious ties into the collective conscious. And if we can keep our mind clear, it will use will do that. It is using those, but it's doing it through your unconsciousness, getting the answers like Ed Casey would,
Exactly.
in his, that's what my belief in it. But you can feel it's so much more than just that, though. You can feel the power of it.
Well, the pendulum itself, it's like a crystal ball or tarot cards or anything else. It's just a tool. I mean, there's nothing magical. It's a rock on a string. It's a weight on a string.
I compare its communication, though, like the guy in Captain Pike in Star Trek, that after he's been disfigured and he's in the chair and he's got the one beep for yes, two beeps for no. You're kind of stuck to yes and no questions, right?
Yeah, but it's a bit tedious at times. But you get accurate answers. You get either a yes or a no. If it swings back and forth, you need to ask the question in another form. Or sometimes if you're dealing with a spirit, maybe the spirit just doesn't want to answer.
I always thought if I had the ability to do that, do what you do, or have abilities. I've had psychic experiences, but nothing controlled. But if I had the ability to do, I'd do what you did. My number one thing would be finding missing children. That would be the number one thing I'd want to do. So more
you're
power to
absolutely
you.
right about the subconscious. I mean, the thing that moves the pendulum is the micro muscles in your fingertip, and they move in response to your subconscious mind. And your subconscious mind is what's contacting Akashic records or the spirits, or in our case, ETs, whatever. That's how it works.
Yeah, that's really how I believe it works, and that's why I think a lot of people that flip out, I'm like, you need to open your mind to this. Because there, I think there's a lot of people like I said, Edgar Casey being one of them, that have shown that humans have the ability within their unconsciousness, their subconscious, to tap into the collective unconscious and give you answers from it. And I think the pendulum is one of the, like you said, training wheels or not, one of the easiest ways to access that. So I've always been interested in that. I want to get into more of that. I would like to talk later tonight about some of your missing persons cases. But let's go ahead and get to George. George. I gave a little bit of your background, but how did you get involved in paranormal research, UFOs, and then how did Lindsey Higgins end up coming to you?
Well, I've always had an interest in the paranormal, and particularly life in the universe. I mean, just all my life. It's just a natural interest, and was all very excited about the budding space program back in the 60s and whatnot. So that's just a natural given for me.
Yeah.
With respect to Lindsey, now that's an interesting story, and that's what the book's all about. Back in the late 1980s, early 1990s, I was affiliated with the Mutual UFO Network, and I was the assistant state director for Louisiana. And I had an opportunity to speak with a number of people in Northwest Louisiana who had had encounters or other experiences. And what I learned very quickly, most of these people were not really that concerned about what is this thing. They were more appreciative about having someone that they could talk to who would respect their confidentiality and might give some feedback from other folks who had maybe had a similar type encounter. And that's kind of where I focused my energies. And Dan was living in Shreveport at the time, and very often we both would go to conduct these sessions with these individuals who were very appreciative just to have somebody to talk to, because they often sat on this experience for decades. You can't go talk to your pastor about it necessarily, can't talk to your family. There just was no outlet for what had occurred. And so they very much enjoyed just being able to talk about it. They really weren't interested necessarily in what it was, what it's going to lead to. It's just, it's out now. Okay.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the track I took, not so much an investigator to prove or disprove anything, because I didn't have any issues with that, but more to be a confidential ear for people who had had extraordinary experiences and wanted to basically just get it off their chest. And this is what was Lindsey's situation. Most of her life, in fact, I'd say all of her life, Lindsey has had paranormal experiences, conversations, if you will, with spirits, and apparently some very long-term encounters with what we would call extraterrestrials. I don't particularly like that term, but we'll use it just for a clarification sake. And like so many others, you couldn't explain these things to her family. I mean, she also saw as a child growing up a lot of these shadow people, couldn't see their faces.
See, I'm going to stop you right there, because that was one of the other things that interests me in the show, in the episode, because she refers to them as, I can't talk about the three shadow people over there. And when she said that, it interested me, because I'm trying to discover what's been going on with me. My 17 to 18 year, I was 17 to 18, and I got encountered what is a shadow person, people have described, that tormented me for 4 or 5 months and almost drove me to the brink. And it is also later on, years later, I connected it to a camping trip, and it affected me and 3 other people, and it affected the same people that were on this camping trip, or at least one of them. And we had encountered something in those woods. And I've now, years later, after interviewing people, I've started to connect the dots between those 2 instances, the shadow person and the maybe abduction in the woods. So I find this really interesting. I've been really looking forward to this show because I want to hear more than what they gave us on that show tonight, especially when it concerns her childhood.
Definitely had these descriptions. Shadow people could not see their faces. And I had spoken to, and Dan and I had both spoken to a number of people many years ago who described, if you will, shadow people, but either they could not see their faces or they would not see their faces. But they didn't see the faces in any case. So that was a consistency. So Lindsey basically sat on all this for decade after decade. And growing up, she had intense abdominal pains. I mean, talking about the age of 9, 10, 11, 12. And there was no diagnosis for what was causing this discomfort. I mean, she was hospitalized, all the battery of tests you can think of were run, and there was no diagnosis available that would explain her distress. And the best the physicians could come up with is, well, her mother's dying of cancer, so Lindsey's doing this just to get attention. Of course, that was nonsense. So there's a lot of stuff going on a long time in Lindsey's case. Finally, she just reaches a point to where she says, I can't sit on this anymore. I've got to let this out. Just the internal pressure of having to deal with this. And that's when she listened to a particular podcast that mentioned a Los Angeles production company that was looking for stories, real, genuine stories of people who had lifelong paranormal experiences. And those stories would possibly end up as part of the Netflix series Haunted. And Lindsey just kind of had a little moment of flash of, oh, well, that's how I'm going to do it. That's what I'm going to do. So she wrote up her story. And as the deadline approached, and 10 minutes before the actual deadline, she hit the send button on her computer. Story went out to the production company, and 14 hours later, she had a phone call from them to set up a formal Skype interview where she could actually describe her story. And they loved it and said, okay, you're going to be part of this series. And they asked that, did she know of any of the people in the Shreveport-Bossier City area, this is Northwest Louisiana, who had similar experiences or knew of similar experiences. And that's when she contacted one of the friends that she had who she had discussed these matters with, happened to be a lady that I also knew. And the lady said, Lindsey, you need to talk to George Sewell. He's studied this, he has information about it, and it might be useful to you. So out of the blue, from my standpoint, one evening the resident's phone rang, and normally I don't answer because at that time of night they're usually junk calls, but I had a little inclination. Okay, I might want to take this one. So I did. So, okay, hello, is this George Sewell? Yes. This is Lindsey Higgins. Well, Joe Best said I could call you and we could talk. And I recognized the name and said, okay, well, what should we talk about? And for the next 2 hours, Lindsey basically described her life from an age of about 2.5 to 3 years old, where she had an incredible encounter with a spirit being, up until the present time, which included everything that was shown in the Netflix series. And I was able to give her feedback at that moment that, well, Lindsey, just about everything you've told me, I've heard before from other people in various locations in different time frames. So whatever it is you're describing, it has occurred in some fashion to other people. And that was a great relief for her. And because of that interaction with me, the production company said, okay, George, well, you want to be a part of this series? Okay, sure, fine. So that's when I first met Lindsey in person. Was in Pasadena, California, on set for the filming of the Netflix series. And we got along beautifully, and I was very impressed with her ability. And much of that episode is just her telling her story. And it's very articulate. I mean, she's very articulate, and she is very descriptive. And her story has not changed one iota for many, many years. So she's real focused on, I think, real events. She's talking about memories. She's not talking about any hypnotic or other.
Right. She hasn't done any of that.
No, she has had recurring dreams, and the dreams are very consistent. So there's a lot of validity to what she's recalling based on what I'm familiar with.
And I mean, she also has the flashbacks during her medical procedures as a child and as a college student later.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is common. You get for people to go to a dentist or a doctor, and you're sitting in a chair, and they're coming at you. They bring you back the flashback of these incidences. I mean, what you described, like with her abdominal pain, when I was watching the episode, I thought about that. I'm like, if this would have been 20, 30 years later with a child with those symptoms going to hospital, they would have called CPS. They would have had I'm not joking, because they look at that as trauma. It's very similar to somebody who's been through sexual abuse.
Yeah, but there was no physical evidence whatsoever.
Right.
There were no marks. There was nothing physical to attribute it to. That was part of the issues they were having with the diagnostic.
But I'm saying psychologically, what she's dealing with and going through at that time would be very similar. It'd be hard to spot for some people, and the professional community don't know anything about alien abduction. That's where their mind might go. That's the thing. People don't talk about this. They keep it in for many years. What I'm interested in is her past too, because it also seems to target. I'm somebody that describes myself as having a paranormal life. Like, I've had so much stuff talking to spirits when I was a kid. It seems like everybody I've known that's been involved in, not everyone, but a lot, have had some psychic ability. Not all. Like my friend Terry Lovelace, I don't think he'd say he had any psychic ability back then. He's been abducted and all that. But I know a lot of others that one there are psychics now, professional psychics that think they might have been abducted. They have some interest in it. For her, she when she was 2.5 years old, she had a paranormal experience.
Oh,
talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's covered in the book. And that was the first thing she described to me when we had our first telephone conversations was her family's a big restaurant family in Shreveport, Louisiana. I mean, they're very well respected. And at that time, and this would have been the middle 1970s, her father, Joe Fertitta, who just loved railroads. And there was one particular railroad station in Shreveport that he had just loved since childhood. He would often just sneak away and just play around the central station, railroad station. And there came a time where he was able to actually acquire it and turn it into a very nice restaurant. And so the downstairs portion was the restaurant. The family resided upstairs. And there was a big, beautiful balcony separating the first and second floors, viewed from the outside. And Lindsey at this time was 2.5 to 3. And when the family's downstairs with the restaurant, she's up in her little room and by herself. And there was one day where it was a nice, bright, sunny day. And you've got these big, huge, floor windows going up in her room. And she wanted to go outside and play. And a few moments later, a few folks outside of the restaurant who were walking into the restaurant noticed this little 2.5, 3-year-old little girl just running around the balcony outside. And they go, whoa, that doesn't look right. So they alerted the staff inside. Of course, her father and mother run upstairs. And there's little Lindsey out on the balcony. And of course, they bring her back inside and they close the very large double hung window and ask, well, Lindsey, how did you get out on the balcony? And she says, well, my friend Morlock opened the window for me.
Oh.
And therein hung a tale that Dan and I pursued via the pendulum as a communication device to try and track down Lindsey's Morlock. And Dan might want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, and we tracked him down. We tracked him down. We found him.
So, like, this is so you guys, after talking to her about this story, you went and tried to communicate with the pendulum with the spirit of Morlock, her childhood, I guess, ghost friend?
Yeah, that is something of a detective story that's related in Paranormal Pendulum 2, the book that I wrote, and George was incredibly helpful in the research area. But we were trying to find Morlock, and we were doing some pendulum research. We were going to go to the big old cemetery in town in the afternoon. In the morning, we were kicking around. We decided to do just a general session and see if anybody showed up. And the guy showed up, spirit showed up. And we had a pleasant conversation. This guy who died after World War I. And we said, well, we're going to the cemetery. Are you buried there? He said, yeah. I said, well, can we come visit your gravesite? He said, yeah. So that afternoon, George and I go to the cemetery, make the contact with the guy. He leads us to a rather prominent gravesite, and it's by somebody else. It wasn't him. And basically, he handed us off to this other guy, a spirit by the name of Pinnock. And then Pinnock basically took us by the hand and led us to the gravesite of a family, the Woodworth family. Patriarch was a guy by the name of W.D. Woodworth. He had a daughter, Sally Murph Woodworth, and also another daughter. And it turns out that W.D. is more like he is the reincarnation. She was the daughter. Sally Murph is the spirit of Lindsey Higgins now, and W.D. is the spirit that is now her father, Joe Fertitta. So it's you got a double reincarnation. Plus the sister was also reincarnated. And
so they're reincarnations of these people that lived in the same area.
Yeah, in the same area back in the late 1800s.
And you're able to communicate with the spirits even though they've been reincarnated. Yeah, and I've heard of this.
Yeah, WD. We kind of made pals with WD. He was quite a character. He was a Irish immigrant, fought in the Civil War, fought in the Indian Wars out west. Came back to the Shreveport area, became something of a rounder. quite a character, and he showed up in several different sessions, basically just to say, "Hi, Dan. Hi, George. How you doing?"
So it shows that Lindsay had from an early age. I mean, I think not a lot of children. I mean, maybe she isn't, I think everybody has psychic abilities, and a lot of children are able to see things, but it shows just the start of her abilities and what might be of interest to some other entities out there, maybe.
Oh, absolutely.
Let me drop in real quick. Sorry, George. One of the interesting things about this book is it involves not only the abduction experience and the contactee experience, it also involves contact with the spirit world, reincarnation, and also contact with higher evolved spirits on basically a higher spiritual plane. It's got all of that mixed into it.
Yeah. Well, and let me add here that with respect to that moment when Lindsay's father and her mother came into the room, brought her back in, closed the windows, and asked, well, who did that? Well, Morlock did it. And well, her father asked, well, what does he look like? And she gave a description, basically kind of a white-haired fellow, kind of tall, kind of lean. And she did not understand what a cigar was. Her parents smoked cigarettes, but she said, well, he's smoking something, but it doesn't look like what you smoke. It's kind of large, big and brown, cigar. And that got Joe's attention because in various locations in the building, there was very prominent aroma of cigar smoke. And that kind of led Joe, as he later revealed, to kind of think that, well, there may be something to that maybe there is a spirit presence in this railroad station. And he had a thought that the spirit was of a particular individual who he met as a child, who was the president of one of the railroads that operated out of that particular building. And we had a session at that location in the 2 years we were doing the prep for the Paranormal Pendulum 3. And we were at the same time talking with our colleague, W.D. Woodworth, and Joe was very insistent that, well, okay, I still think that the spirit was Pete Couch. And we eventually, we gleaned that W.D. had asked Pete Couch, who, for whatever reason, just liked to hang around the old Central Station. I mean, that's where he spent much of his lifetime, and he was a big railroad guy, and that's what railroad guys might do. But W.D. asked Pete, in advance of the Fertitas moving into the building, to keep an eye on the little girl, that she's special. And Pete said, okay, I'll be happy to do that. And so Pete did that at WD's behest. And that was just an interesting way that Dan and I would interpret something one way, Joe would interpret it a little differently. And through the process, over time, we kind of gleaned what may have actually have been the case. So you had both the involvement of WD and the spirit of Pete Couch, and all involved with the Central Station location, and specifically with Lindsey Higgins and the family in general. So it's wonderful how things they're really so connected. They appear separate, but they're all connected.
Well, I think that's what gets left out a lot of the abduction cases, and what goes on in the backgrounds of people who have been abducted is this whole other aspect of the spiritual and family members, psychic abilities, reincarnation. All these things get left out. We go to the brass tacks of the abduction experience, but there's always this almost seems like a behind the curtains workings going on. You could from the other side, to connect people. Well, that's what I see. I've seen that there's always this bigger spiritual element that gets left out a lot of, because people are like, all right, it's already too much to tell people about alien abductions. I don't want to tell them about the ghosts I saw, or the family members I saw aboard the craft that have deceased.
Let me introduce George here. But this whole book, George and I use the phrase "out of the blue" a lot. Mm-hmm. This whole thing, putting George with Lindsay, putting me with George and Lindsay, this whole thing was put together by the spirit world and by a specific spirit in that world. And there's a chapter in the book called "The Stage Manager," and it's a spirit of someone who put us all together and actually stage managed the whole thing that ended up producing this specific book. And George is a little bit more familiar with that than I am.
And as a bit of irony to this, earlier this afternoon, I completed a performance at the Shreveport Little Theater of our town where I played the stage manager. So there's what Dan's referring to is in the 2 years that we spent researching what's going on with Lindsey Higgins' life. I mean, we were using primarily the paranormal pendulum as a research tool. We also had two very fine psychics, mediums, who were also working with us. So we were looking at everything from so many angles. And we began to realize that, well, there's a lot of dimensions involved with this particular project. And what we had to come to terms with was, well, let me just tell you what happened. It takes a lot to get my attention, okay? And during this investigation, my general routine most mornings was get up bright and early, close to dawn, sunrise, and take a mile walk down to Mike Woods Park in Bossier City. Now, this is adjacent to the southern end of the runway at Barksdale Air Force Base, and I think there may be something involved there.
Yeah.
But I would go down early, and this particular December morning, it was frosty, and the baseball field had a nice frost on it. It was just really pretty. So I took a photograph of it with my iPhone, and I put it up on Facebook as a scene on my morning stroll type thing, and got a lot of responses from it. Oh, George, what a pretty ball field it is. Oh, it looks so sparkly, but what's with the blue tennis ball? Huh? I hadn't even noticed. Went back and looked at the photograph. Yeah. Hovering above the baseball field is a tennis ball sized blue orb. And I said, whoa, well, that's got to be a lens flare or something, and whatever. But in subsequent walks over the next 2 weeks, every time I would come around the track, walk the mile track around the park, and come to that particular point and say, well, wait a minute, I'm facing due east. There's the ballpark. Let me recreate that photograph just to see what the deal is. And so I take the picture, get back to the house, look at it, and there's an orb. I didn't see the orb. The camera photographed the orb. And that began to happen with regularity. And in particular, the orb started to be consistent. It tended to be kind of a blue orb. And I said, whoa, this is beyond lens flares, camera artifacts. I mean, so I sent them all off to Dan. And I said, Dan, look at this stuff. Take out your pendulum, pal, and ask some questions. See what you glean from what my camera's photographing. And Dan came back with, the orb is a spirit. It's a spirit known to you, George, but not in this lifetime. Okay. That got my attention. I'm not that familiar with any of my previous incarnations. It's kind of irrelevant to me, but I had a little idea. Well, let's go look at 19th century American actresses. And so
that just came to you, that idea?
Yeah,
out of the blue.
Out of the blue. And there's a reason why, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But I kept coming across an actress, Kate Bateman, born into a theatrical family in Baltimore in 1841. Child actress, traveled all over the country. I had a wonderful review of her performance in New Orleans in December of 1860 at the St. Charles Theater, where she was doing Juliet in Romeo and Juliet. So very, very popular actress. Married an Englishman, George Crowe, moved over to England and was very popular in the London theater for much of the end of the 19th century and the very early 20th century. And so, okay, Dan, this is the name I've come up with. What does your pendulum say? And pendulum said, well, that seems to be the case. And with one of our mediums, I set up a formal session just specifically to look into this Kate Bateman, if you will. And what Colleen, the medium, Kate was there. Oh gosh, Kate was there. And Kate had a lot to say. And Kate was very interested in this project and essentially was saying that we all know each other. We've been doing this for such a long time. This is what we do. And it became evident that Kate kind of had an overlay over Lindsey all of her life. So everything Lindsey was experiencing, Kate was fully aware of. And she was very much aware of what this was doing to Lindsey in having to suppress all this. And it appears to our satisfaction that Kate kind of put the little bug in Lindsey's ear. It's time to get out of this. And this led her to listen to this particular podcast, to get this particular information about this particular production company, to write down your particular story about your life. And, oh, by the way, call Joe Beth, and you'll need to call George, and George will need to call Dan. And it just kept going like that for 2 years. So,
well, you had the 6 degrees of separation there, less than with your initial contact with Lindsey through a friend. I mean, just that small coincidence that she's looking for somebody and she knows somebody that knows you. These things kind of work.
We learned for sure about all this is there are no such things as coincidences.
Right.
Yeah, let me give you an example there. More of the out of the blue stuff. We had a lot of help with this book that just came to us from out of nowhere. A good example. George just happened to meet up with a particular medium, very talented, calling the board in Shreveport, and she came aboard voluntarily and became a very active member of our research team. I've got a good friend named Dave McMillan. We've known each other since our advertising days back in the 1970s. And Dave has a radio program, a local program, and he interviewed us, and we were talking about what was coming up. And Dave just kind of threw it out. Oh, by the way, I practice the pendulum. In fact, I'll make pendulums. Oh, and by the way, I'm married to a medium. My wife is a medium. So all of a sudden, again, out of the blue, we had another pendulum dowser and another medium as part of our team. They became very active in it.
Well, I see how these things. I mean, it's from even my own show, like the way things came together for me, Jamie, and Rob, and with guests I've had and all that. I've seen it, the synchronicities. I'm a total believer. I'm a Star Wars fan, so I call it the Force.
Yeah,
that moves and binds everything and puts us together. These synchronicities.
Something is moving.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
I've seen them in my even weird, crazy synchronicities and things that I came across during my shadow person experience that were crazy. It was like synchronicities abounded during that. It's weird when you get into you go down the rabbit hole, how, like I said, it's like a force or something that pulls people together in these experiences. I'm interested in, too, George, you said as a MUFON member in the 80s, you were investigating people who were having abduction experiences in the Shreveport area.
Well, I wouldn't use the word investigating because we weren't trying to prove or disprove.
You were listening.
That's not their interest. They just wanted to talk about what happened. So I don't like the word investigate because that's not really what I'm doing. I'm a confidential ear and can give some very constructive feedback.
What interests me about it is that there have been places and towns of suddenly people start coming together and realizing that something's happening in their town. People are being abducted or having abduction experiences in a certain location. And I'm always interested in why.
Yeah.
Why would they pick a certain location like Shreveport and be abducting more than a number of people?
We cover that in the book. There is something about the specific property that the Fertitta family lived on after they closed the restaurant in the Central Station in Shreveport that certainly helped explain why Lindsey was seeing all of these entities, all of these beings, and all of these encounters. The property that Joe Fertitta purchased and where they lived on, this is back in the early 80s. And at that time, this is in South Shreveport. It's high ground. At that time, it was way out of town. It was very, very rural. But Joe was telling us that when he purchased the land, he had some expert landmen come out just to assess exactly what the property was. First off, it's high ground, built up from river silt over hundreds of thousands of years. and the ground had a freshwater spring that had been there for a long, long, long time. And it was also adjacent to a bayou. And these were some of the characteristics that, in looking back at some of the things I had heard in some of the literature reports, that if you got land that has water involved, and if it has particularly some association with Native Americans, and this particular plot of land was very prominent with the Caddo Indians in Caddo Parish in Louisiana. So the land itself, where the house was, or the trailer, where they were in the trailer at the time, lent itself to these kind of experiences. And lo and behold, that seems to be the case. In much of our research there on site and in other sessions over the period of 2 years, it was brought to our attention that there is, well, I'll say likely, I think Dan would say there is, but there's likely a portal at that location for the entrance and exits of individuals as well as craft or whatnot, and that this is what a lot of Lindsey may have been encountering. And her father kind of gave a good, credible story about that, in that in the middle 1980s, Lindsey's maternal uncle was in the Air Force, and he was stationed at Barksdale Air Force Base. And there was one night when he brought his young son out to the Fertitta property in South Shreveport, and specifically to point to a certain location in the sky, telling his son, now you watch that area, now you watch there. And that's when what we would call a UFO just kind of materialized, did its thing, and then winked out. And the uncle said to his son, now you've seen it, but you can never tell anybody that you saw it. And
that's really interesting.
Coming from Lindsey's father, that kind of supports the fact that there may have been a known portal or access point there that had some regularity to it, to where her uncle would know that if I come out this night and around this time, something should be there.
Or to me, what that screams to me is that possibly that her uncle was a contactee or abductee.
That's very possible. We didn't go there because this was about Lindsey's experience.
Right.
Dan and I
but that's maybe a family history, is what I'm saying.
Yes. That we definitely suspect, and we touch on that in the book.
Because some contactees say they can make UFOs appear. Sorry, I just I find that story really interesting, because some contactees, people that are not more than abductees, are really in a contactee state with aliens or interdimensional or whatever, claim that they can almost predict when these things are going to come out in the sky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they
Go
get
ahead, Dan, sorry.
They can get a sense that there's a knowing. There's a knowing.
Yeah, that's what I found interesting about that experience. Sorry, Dan, you were going to say something.
No, I just going to say there's a. I think Lindsey, when she was a child, she was seeing what we call shadow people, and I think she was seeing two different types of beings. One, I think she was seeing, like a little better term, aliens for whatever reason.
Right.
Where she slept was up. In other words, the ground below her sloped down. There was no porch out there, so her window was, 10 feet above the ground. So it wasn't people walking by. It was impossible. Yet she would see people outside her window. And I think, they were the visitors who came through the portal. Also because the land is not sacred to the Native Americans, but it is very special. And we, long story short, back in 1811, you've heard the New Madrid earthquake. Enormous earthquake. It shook the southeast. The Indians, the Caddo Indians up in the northern part of our state, got a message from out of the blue to get out of town, go down south where Shreveport is now located, where they can have fresh water, because the water was about to go bad at their villages. Sure enough, the quake happens, the water goes bad. Fortunately, the Indians are already down there on Lindsey's on the property that became Fertitta property, where the freshwater spring is still there. So they got through the crisis because they had fresh water. During our research, we discovered there were some Indian spirits there who had remained with the property. I believe there were 6. And some of what she was seeing were the spirits of these Indians who were there. They weren't haunting.
Makes sense.
They were there because the land was very important, and they were basically, as they told us later on, just kind of looking out after the property.
No, it makes sense. It makes sense. I mean,
and later
ghosts
on,
can
we
appear
were able
as
to
like
cross a couple of
shadows.
those spirits. We were able to cross a couple of those spirits over.
Really?
Yeah, we had. I think it was 6, right, George? 6.
I'm not sure the whole number of 3 for sure. One
3
female and 2 males did cross over.
There were several. There were several, and we told them again, using the pendulum for communication. You don't have to stay here. You can cross over. There's no reason for you to be trapped here. Well, then we're not trapped here. We're here because we want to. They said, but if you want to go over, and it's okay for you guys to do that. And we had one of our mediums with us. 2 or 3 of them crossed on over and left us, but 3 of the Native American spirits stayed there because they wanted just to take care of the land, make sure it was okay. As we were leaving the property at that afternoon, our medium looked back and said, "Oh, look, I couldn't see anything," but she said the three Indians are waving by to us. She could see them.
What I find interesting about the land and the possible portal, it's, a lot of people talking about the Skinwalker Ranch, all the different kinds of activity, from cryptid to UFO, alien, dogmen, kind of just unusual things that happen there, cattle mutilations or animal mutilations. I don't know about cattle. But that there are places that maybe are gateways for alien transportation, let's say an actual physical ship. But is there side effects from that too? That leaves a doorway open. Whatever hyperspace lane they're using or portal they're using leaves something open for a lot of things to come through, be it different kinds of beings from other realms, is what I've always wondered in these cases. And that's why a certain area like Shreveport has all these abductions, maybe.
Well, we don't have the knowledge of physics that other species may have. Okay, so we're so limited in what we call a portal, and we haven't a clue as to how it's working or what's going on. We really don't. We just have some evidence that something really strange is going on, and it's between here and wherever there is. We did some pendulum work specifically on the property with the question of the portal to see if we can glean enough information to be fairly confident that it is there, or to really rule it out as, well, it's an aberration or something. And the information that came across consistently over time through various pendulum sessions with different people holding, also with the mediums, is that this particular portal that is being used, that's associated with this property, was there before the earth was formed. That's a head knocking thought.
That's a lot, yeah.
But nonetheless, that was the information that was presented. So, definitely something's going on. There is some sort of means of stepping from one realm into another, and it seems to be at this geographic location in South Shreveport, Louisiana. And it's interesting that, particularly since Lindsey did her Netflix thing, of course, a lot of people just from all around the country contacted her. Oh, we're so glad to see this. Oh, let me tell you. And so that was the beautiful part of this. I mean, that's one reason why Dan and I were excited about doing it. But she was also hearing from people in that general part of town, which is now heavily who are still seeing UFOs and having other strange experiences. So that part of town is still very active, despite its being much more developed than it was in the days when Lindsey was out there in her youth.
Well, if there's a portal there, you have to suspect that it's all still happening. That there are people like Lindsey right now going through her experience.
That's what we're suspecting. Yeah. We haven't had an opportunity to visit with some of the other people and follow up with
Be interesting. It would be really interesting to start following up on the cases in Shreveport, to really look at a local area that more and more people are experiencing this in, or have been for years, and comparing the stories of what they're experiencing. I mean, a lot of times these stories get compared. People have shared experience with somebody else who's an abductee that lives in another part of the world. And that's interesting. But for a locality that might have a portal or and more abductions happening in a normal location, it'd be interesting to compare stories or have these people start sharing notes more.
Yeah, and Dan, chime in on this if you will, but we didn't really specifically go into the goings on with Mike Woods Park in Bossier City, which again is adjacent to the southern end of the runway at Barksdale Air Force Base. But over the 2 years, just using iPhones, I mean, we collected hundreds of photographs of orbs and other objects in the sky that were clearly not birds in this one particular area. Basically just going to the same location, recreating the same photograph day after day after day after day after day. Not seeing anything particular visually, but the cameras would record on occasion these various orbs or sometimes very strange looking things in the sky. And we had a session there, a pendulum session, specifically to, okay, is there something special about this general area where the park is, where the runway is? And what we came up with through various sessions, that there is a portal in that location. And it was a portal that was built there, placed there, developed there in the late 19th century, anticipating humans taking flight. That apparently there was interest that we want to track and or keep up with, see what's going on with humans when they can get off the planet and start flying around the atmosphere. And there possibly was some projected awareness that this area may eventually be a part of a major
well, when time's out the window, when we get an alien scene, we got to go to commercial break here. Time could be out the window. They can see, maybe they know the future. Maybe they're able to see, maybe they're time travelers and they know that's where an Air Force base would be. Because, I mean, look at all the Air Force bases and the sightings that happen at these bases that aren't the Air Force, but other ships. We got to go to commercial break, guys. We're going to continue this because I want to talk more, too, about Lindsey and her reincarnation. And, because a lot of the questions always asked in alien abductions, why me? Why am I being taken? And I've seen a lot of abduction cases turn into more contactee experiences as they get to learn that this is a choice you made. And we get into the past lives. I've had other abductees get into this and talk about it. They don't cover a lot of this on shows because it gets a little too crazy for the general public. But when you get down this rabbit hole, you start finding these kind of answers. We'll continue on with that. We're going to go to our commercial break and be back with our guests, Dan Baldwin and George Sewell. Dan, author of Paranormal Pendulum, Volumes 1 through 3. The third one, I think, is the volume we're talking about tonight with Lindsey Higgins' case, right? Volume 3. All right, guys, we'll be right back after the short commercial break.
Into the combined effects of sensory deprivation and hallucinatory drugs. The subject of the experiment is himself, and the experiment is out of control. Ken Russell's Altered States, a film that must not be missed, is in the West End now. Altered States, Certificate X.
Do you wish for more paranormal and spiritual content? The Paranormal Chronicles magazine is a free digital magazine crammed with the very best in paranormal and spiritual articles and features. No sign-up, no subscription, just free reading and knowledge for you. Read today at www.paranormalchronicles.com/magazine.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHN Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Join us every Wednesday night at midnight Eastern Standard Time for Weird Wednesday, the live stream, with your hosts Jamie, the Living Dead Girl, and Rob, the Phantom, where we'll talk about all things paranormal, including zodiac, astrology, tarot card and oracle card readings, live ghost boxing and spirit communication, where we'll do Voices from Beyond, the Cold Case Files. So we hope you join us live on Facebook and YouTube every Wednesday night at midnight Eastern Standard Time. We hope to see you there. Bye-bye.
Paranation Magazine is a new paranormal magazine based out of Denver, Colorado. Our goal isn't just to give you the best paranormal content out there, but to promote paranormal unity. We're doing this by giving everyone an opportunity to tell their stories and to share their experiences. For more information, follow us on Facebook at Paranation Magazine and soon, paranationmag.com.
I've Never Met a Dead Person I Didn't Like is the extraordinary travels of a young, alone, and broke psychic in the highly anticipated new book from internationally renowned psychic, medium, medical intuitive, and best-selling author Sherry Dillard. Critics have described I've Never Met a Dead Person I Didn't Like as an engrossing memoir, an empowering story of how a broken girl came to accept her psychic gift, a refreshing and fun read. I've Never Met a Dead Person I Didn't Like is available through Amazon, Kindle, Barnes & Noble, and wherever books are sold.
Edgar Allan Poe wrote Spirits of the Dead with a pen dipped in warm blood. You will see the ultimate in terror with this important all-star cast. Brigitte Bardot, Alain Delon, Jane Fonda, Terence Stamp, and Peter Fonda in Edgar Allan Poe's Spirits of the Dead. Only Poe's demented genius could bring to the screen such horror and evil. Spirits of the Dead stars Brigitte Bardot, Alain Delon, Jane Fonda, Terence Stamp, and Peter Fonda. Directed by three masters of the cinema, Federico Fellini, Louis Malle, and Roger Vadim. Spirits of the Dead is an adventure in terror beyond your wildest nightmares. Spirits of the Dead in color is rated R.
The answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything is $42. Yes, I thought it over quite thoroughly. It is, it's 42. It would have been simpler, of course, to have known what the actual question was.
But it was the question. The ultimate question. Of everything.
That's not a question. Only when you know the question will you know what the answer means.
You're listening to Paranormal Soup, bringing you the weird every Sunday night. Call into the show and join the discussion. The call-in lines are 219-230-4444 or 260-225-9419 or by Skype caller ID 00JBland00 or JBland Paranormal Soup. And now to your host, Jason Bland.
Tonight's guests are Dan Baldwin and George Sewell. We're talking about their Paranormal Pendulum Volume 3, their investigation of the Lindsey Higgins case. If you might have been familiar with seeing it, if you watched the Netflix show Haunted. We talked about that show before on our show, about some of those episodes. I think on Open Lines Night, it's like, is it real? It is real people's cases, stories on that show. And this was a really incredible one, and if you haven't seen it, definitely going to want to watch it after this interview. Lindsey Higgins abduction case. I particularly remember in the episode that was very terrifying, and even if you don't watch the really great special effects they put in the show, if you just listen to Lindsey's story about when she was a college student in her dorm being taken, her wall dematerializing and being floated through the air, she grabs her ceiling fan, and then when she wakes up the next morning, she gets up and looks on her ceiling fan, and she can see her finger marks on the fan and the dust, and it's streaked as she had been pulled away. That sends chills, even right now, down my spine, thinking about that. These experiences are so much more, though, than what you could find in that TV show episode. When I've interviewed people that are alien abductees and talked to them in private, there's many they don't even share in the interviews because it's so much. And I think that's what it is with the whole disclosure movement right now. The government can't tell us what's going on because they don't understand. It's so complicated and so far out there for people, I don't think they understand it or could even disclose it. We have to start putting our stories together tonight. The lines are open for you to call in and share your experiences or ask questions of our guests. But let's go ahead and get back to the show. Now, I know Jamie wasn't feeling well, so she left us for the night, and I know Rob has. So it's just me and our two guests tonight, Dan Baldwin and George Sewell. Thank you for continuing with us with the show tonight. Phone lines are, let me make sure they are open. Yes, they are open. Call in tonight. Ask questions of our guests. But, yeah, that episode is probably one of my favorites in the Haunted series, too, before I ever knew I was going to have you on because of that particular scene I described where she sees her. I thought that was, like I said, you don't even have to. They had really good special effects. I think they shot it really well. But you could just close your eyes and just listen to her tell the experience. And so you don't need CGI effects to scare the crap out of you with that experience.
Yeah, well, there's more to that scene, Jason, that's not in the book that I can now discuss because the individual who knew me and who knew Lindsey has since passed on. So
sorry for your loss.
It's okay to give a little more detail about Jo Beth. Jo Beth knew Lindsey, and Jo Beth was familiar with me, and particularly my history with the Mutual UFO Network and being assistant state director and talking to people and having an interest in the whole phenomenon. There was a meeting with Lindsey and Jo Beth when Lindsey was really thinking about, I got to get this off my chest. I got to come out. I mean, she was going through that thought process, and she was talking to Jo Beth. And then Lindsey was describing to Jo Beth that event that you were alluding to when she was a sophomore in college, living in Shreveport in one of her father's houses, where, boom, the light came in through the window and the wall started dissolving. And as Lindsey was describing this, Jo Beth said, and let me tell you what happened next. And what Jo Beth described, as Lindsey reports it to me, is that she described everything that happened to Lindsey, and Lindsey was just aghast. And then Jo Beth said, well, Lindsey, you don't know how common that is.
I mean, for an abductee, that's partly relieving to know you're not alone, but also it's got to be somewhat unnerving too.
So that's one of the reasons. One of the primary reasons behind this book is to let people out there know that you're not alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, come out and talk about it. Find someone to talk about it. There are people out there who not only are willing to listen, but who want to listen. George and I are just a couple of, out of a multitude out there. But find somebody and talk about it. It's okay.
This is why I do my show. I had like I said, I had my shadow person experience. I've had a lot of paranormal experiences, but my shadow person experience is the real driver behind me doing this show, because it got so bad after months of this thing. What it would do is come to me in the middle of the night. I feel like it would rip me out of my body and take me on a astral journey and show me things that were happening in real time, like my girlfriend cheating on me or my band getting ready to kick me out. I knew things before they would happen because this thing would show me at night to taunt me. It is an evil SOB. Some people call it demonic. I don't like to term it as that. It felt alien to me is what I always described it, and now I've got more feelings about it. But it would take me on these astral journeys, basically, in the middle of the night. It all ended one night when this thing levitated me up off my bed, up to my ceiling. I actually felt my nose touch the little prickly stucco on the ceiling. I could feel it. And at that moment, I just deep down inside, I couldn't talk. I was paralyzed. But inside, I was like, God, help me. God, help me. Please, God, I am so sorry, God. Because it's a long story, but brought me and two other friends kind of brought this thing upon ourselves. It's a long story and a lot of synchronicities. I wrote it all out in Mike Ricksecker's Paranormal Encounters 2, Volume 2 book. But when it lifted me up and I said that to God, the way they show it in the show, the way the bright light comes through the window and all that is exactly like how the bright light came through my window. And this thing screeched and gone. And then a gentleman stepped out of the bright light, kind of gave me like a little bit of like a stern look, and then disappeared, and it was gone and never to mess with me again. And it turned out that gentleman looks very much like a great-grandfather of mine. So there's so much. I believe I couldn't talk to anybody about this, not even my mom, who's a very open-minded person. And she was very concerned about me at the time. Very concerned, because you could tell I was going through a lot. And she thought it was just a girlfriend breaking up with me, my band breaking up with me, all these bad things were going on. But it was so much more, and I couldn't talk to her about it. Even your mother, even my mother, who I love and have always trusted, I didn't feel like I could talk to her. I didn't want her to scare her and think I'm losing my frickin' mind. She had me go talk to a counselor, and I really couldn't even talk to him. I couldn't talk to him about it. And that's why I do this show, because I don't want people to ever be alone. I want more people to know you have shows like mine and many others that are outlets and great communities in our chat rooms, especially on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch that I do it on. There's great people in these chat rooms to find that'll tell you, I'm right there with you. I've been through this. I've had these experiences. You're not alone. You're not crazy. I mean, for me, that was Art Bell in the 1990s was my only thing that was like my salvation was Art Bell.
Yeah.
Because I would hear people having shadow person's experiences after mine. I'd listen to it actually before I had my experiences. But after mine, I would peek up when I'd hear somebody describe shadow person, and listen to those episodes intently. One of the things I've thought about listening to you guys tonight, when we get on the topic of Art Bell, is he had he had Whitley Strieber, but he had John Lear on his show one night. It's one of the classic episodes, and I've talked about it a billion times on this show, where John Lear talks about aliens and the moon being a soul capacitor, and then aliens are basically responsible for our reincarnations. There's some realm that they're part of our afterlife. And he went off on a tirade that night. And I actually asked John Lear about this. And he said it all came from a night of long talks with Whitley Strieber about the ideas of what the aliens might be really up to and the ideas of the afterlife. But it fascinated me when I heard that. It was like 96 or something. I don't remember. It was, this is before even my shadow person experience. I heard that thing. And something in my imagination peaked on that whole idea. I've been fascinated with the moon, fascinated with the idea of aliens and the afterlife. We're going to have next week a guest on about near-death experiences, and I've talked about with my friend who's an abductee, Terry Lovelace, how similar near-death experiences are to abduction experiences. That there's this whole spiritual realm involved in alien abduction that just does not get looked at seriously enough.
Yeah, we had direct experience with one of those highly developed entities is the only word I can think of. It very highly, very highly developed, very spiritual entity. Had basically a physical encounter again out at Mike Woods Park, where there was George, me, Pendulum Dave, and
Lauren.
Lauren, our medium. We were sitting there doing a pendulum session, I believe George is the one that got it started, but we asked for some kind of showing of something, and this spiritual entity showed up in the center of our little circle, and Lauren, our medium, picked up on it just like that, and then I picked up on it a little bit, but there was an overwhelming, I mean, literally overwhelming feeling of what Lauren called mother love beaming at us.
Oh,
Yeah, Lauren felt it heavily. I felt it enough that I started crying. In fact, if you listen to the transcript of the meeting, you hear Dan say, I'm tearing up. I'm tearing up here.
see, it's interesting you say that, because the thing that I felt the moment I was saved, and I call it saved by this shadow person, that's how I described the feeling I had when I was saved, was this, all my fear disappeared. All I could feel was this the most warm, compassionate feeling I could ever feel in my life, that I was never alone. I had nothing to fear. There was always something there with me. I call it the force. And the only other times I've experienced that in my life is once when I saw my youngest son, Liam, many years before he was born. In the full daylight, in my parents' living room, I saw this 8 or 9 year old kid, he's 6 now, walk through my parents' living room right up to me, translucent. And I felt that same feeling I felt from the shadow person experience. I call it God, the force, or whatever.
Mhm.
And then it turns out many years later,
Yeah.
when my son was born and I saw him smile, when the day he was born, he made a smile. I knew right then that child I saw in my parents' living room is him.
Yeah.
Well, the feeling we had was undeniable. It was powerful, extremely powerful.
Yeah, I like I said,
Undeniable.
there's no words for it.
Yeah.
Now, the backstory was of the individual that Dan's referring to. For all this time, this would originally introduced as what we would call an extraterrestrial. This was an ET. He gave us permission to use that name just for simplicity's sake. But this was the individual who was most directly involved in what was going on with Lindsey Higgins. Apparently, he was kind of a manager of a team that was working with Lindsey over thousands of years for a particular project. And much of that project and her involvement was because she would be reincarnating on Earth, and that was an element that was necessary to the end result of whatever this long-term project was to achieve. But we had that session that Dan referred, and we were communicating with ET on specific things. And I just asked, well, ET, is there a way you can present yourself so that perhaps Lauren will have a better impression of your more natural self? And that's what Dan just described. So that's a little different from what most people would think of an extraterrestrial. And curiously, in a session with the other medium, Colleen, I asked pretty much the same thing. You know, we have ET, and we wish to know more about ET's true nature vis-a-vis what we can perceive. And Colleen gave a very similar description that this is a soul, I'll use that word, who is so evolved that they can move through the universe, don't need bodies or crafts or whatnot.
Right. I've made this point on my show before, is that, I mean, there's technology, aliens can be so far advanced technology, but we always forget about the spiritual side.
Mhm.
They'd be so far advanced spiritual. Look at, I mean, again, the Star Wars reference here, but in the horrible Last Jedi Star Wars movie, but still, Luke Skywalker is able to project himself physically to another location and be there and fight, Kylo Ren. I know, I'm a Star Wars geek, but aliens in a galaxy far, far away, a long, long time ago, could have already developed the means of travel. It's like K-Pax, even like the movie K-Pax. Kevin Spacey, horrible person.
Good movie though.
But a good movie. He's a horrible person. Good movie. That they don't travel with a spaceship. They travel by entering somebody else and possessing somebody else's body. Well, they could also travel. Look at all the astral projectors I've had on my show are doing this. They're traveling somewhere else. Remote viewers in their mind are seeing things they can't see. If you're able to reach that developed stage of spiritual awareness and power, you wouldn't need ships to fly. You wouldn't even have to leave your home. And I've always wondered that about my shadow person experience, that this is some vindictive alien that's trolling me for some reason, and 2 other friends, by the way, I haven't even added to that, because it felt alien to me. That's how I felt. Every time somebody tried to label it as something demonic, I would cringe away from that.
No.
Yeah, we've again. I've been doing this for a couple of decades, and George and I have been on this couple of projects for many years. We've never run into a negative experience. I know there are negative entities out there, but we've never run into them. And I think the main reason is that we don't go looking for them.
That I believe that 100%. We do live spirit box sessions on this show.
Yeah.
And I've had people criticize me or be worried for me. One, I don't do it. I only do it on the show live here. I don't practice it at home alone. But I say I never worry about it because we have a fun time, and the spirits, I think, reflect our intent to have a fun time and a connected time too, because people who call into the show want to connect with their loved ones. We have a good purpose behind it and a good intent, a good feeling and vibe. I'm never really worried about something dark coming through.
Well, you get what you expect. For example, if we're doing a session and you hear, we heard 3 knocks, that's demonic. Well, no, it's the spirit going knock, 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 saying, hello, I'm here, let's talk.
I do think you can get dark things if you go in with bad intent or
You
scared.
often you get what you expect. If you're expecting and if you're looking for negativity, you're going to find it. We just don't
or believe you'll get negativity.
Yeah.
You know, again, another Star Wars reference I use on the show is Luke on the cave in Dagobah. Yoda tells him to go into this dark cave and you don't need your weapons, you know, or however Yoda would say it. And Luke says, yeah, not happening, and takes his weapons in. And what he ends up doing is fighting his father in this cave, which is really just like a figment of a ghost or of his ego or whatever, some symbolic thing that happens, but it's because his intent he went in there. And I've always relayed that to the paranormal. I've seen people live in a house that's had all this negative stuff happen, and then they get out of the house. When I used to do paranormal investigation, a team would come in, we're all doing what we love and having a good time. And the activity, for one, we don't get anything negative happening when we're there that night. And then the people will say, a lot of the negative stuff is stopped. I said, because like I've told people when they're having negative stuff happen in their home, throw a party, have good vibes. It kills a lot of what's going on. It does. It will change. Yeah. I've also seen things get worse for people when people come in and investigate it because they go in there and go, it's a demon, or they're being aggressive or they're looking for trouble, and then things get worse in the home.
Yeah.
There's
it is
a
your
famous
intent.
Star Trek episode where Kirk is with the Klingons and they're on the ship, and there's this entity making them fight each other.
Yes,
and
great
the
episode.
way they get rid of the entity is they start laughing, and they laugh the entity away.
See, Gene Roddenberry was a genius, though. I think he saw into so many things, really did, and his writers. It wasn't just Gene Roddenberry, but I'm a big Star Trek fan too.
We had a lot of good laughs with our friend W.D. Woodward.
But yeah, I think intent has a lot to do with this. Now, on the end of I find fascinating is, like I said, I was talking at the beginning after commercial break, is that a lot of these abductees, the question is, why me? Why is this happening for Lindsey? And I found this with some other abductees that go through regression to get these answers, or just through their contact with the aliens are told this, that they chose this before they were ever born. And my camping abduction, maybe possible abduction experience, because it was just a dream to me for a long time. I wrote it off and wouldn't look at it as it's just a dream that happened to me out in the woods, and didn't matter that I was moved in my tent and my boots were removed. None of that mattered. Didn't matter that I saw a big huge light with my friend right afterwards out in the woods. Doesn't matter. I would not look at it. Even though I was into all this paranormal stuff, I would just write it off until my friend's book, Incident at Devil's Den, kind of woke me up to it. But when the dream, that all I can remember of it is being floated up out of my tent. I'm looking down over the Red River Gorge, Kentucky Valley, and a big bright lights behind me. I try to turn and look, but it's just a bright light, and all I can think is in my head. I don't know why this thought is they found me, and another part of me knows what this is, knows that they've been looking for me. And they finally found me. What would that mean? And I've always wondered, is that past life related? For Lindsey, if she chose this as a past, part of her experience has her past reincarnations all gone through this abduction experience and contact?
What we came up with, and this is, again, over time with multiple pendulum sessions, different people holding the pendulum, also the medium. So we try and cross-check everything. If it's very consistent, we'll tend to give it a measure of validity. But what seemed to be the case with what's happening with Lindsey is that in a time frame we came up with 6,000 years ago on a different plane than where the dearly departed go. Apparently this is a little separate from that. But E.T., if you will, that being, as best described by Dan and Lauren at the session in Mike Woods Park, where just vast blue colored motherly love type presence. That presence was with Lindsey at this time, or using our measurement, 6,000 years ago. But Lindsey was invited and asked into a long-term process that would have definite benefits to Homo sapiens, particularly those on Earth, but also for some other species. And Lindsey's recruitment, if you will, is because she's an earthbound spirit and would be reincarnating over these many thousands and thousands of years. And Lindsey said, this is a good thing, and yes, I will do it. And it was a measure of relief to Lindsey when that was established, because Lindsey's first reaction to that was, well, if I said I would do it, then I would do it. And that means it'll continue. But then Lindsey had the presence of mind to say, okay, well, if we're in this together and it's going to continue, we do not want this discomfort anymore. If we have future visitations and
they don't sound like fun. What they describe in the show does not sound like fun times. It sounds like a sexual assault is what a lot of these do sound like.
We can't address that because that was not anything presented in this. I think a lot of that is, if you use the word abduction, it automatically has a very negative criminal background. I mean, just the term. So you're already setting the stage for something that is horrendous. And that may or may not be what's happening. It just may be the way that's being perceived due to the vocabulary.
I have to interrupt you on that, because and the reason I disagree with that slightly is just from her description of what they did to her female area with the probe. That's assaulting. I mean, that would be, I mean, even if they're not intending that, the aliens are interdimensional, to her, what was happening to her was an assault. That is an assault. It doesn't matter what she chose, past life or anything, what she understood in that moment and her fear. I mean, it left scars in her mind, and they have post-traumatic stress, flashbacks. That was an assault at that time. That we do have to look at that in the face, that these instances, at least when they first occur with people, are very traumatic in that sense.
No, nobody denies that whatsoever. But when you are able to get a much larger perspective over time,
I get that.
Then, okay, you begin to see that this is not exactly what I thought it was. It's something different. I may have put into it more fear and terror than perhaps was really necessary. We don't,
I get that. I understand that.
People are so different.
But I also want to understand, too, because sometimes I've had some people that claim they feel like they've been taken by different, like they'll be taken by good aliens and they'll be taken by bad aliens. And, I'm saying, like, good ones that are, it's like a contactee experience, it's information, it's enlightening, it's pleasant, to now they're being taken by something else that's not pleasant and is assaulting them in some way. Is it possible that Lindsey's been abducted by other species, not just one?
We didn't encounter that.
I just was curious because I've seen
the same group that has been with her for 6,000 years. It's the same group, and is monitored or directed by the individual that we call ET. So this just this one particular group working with her on a specific project. And curiously,
go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say we gleaned a little bit about maybe what all this was about, in that the end game seems to be to reach a point to where Homo sapiens have a mean lifespan of say 150 years rather than say 70 to 80, and coinciding with that would be a reawakening of the sixth sense to allow human beings to have a much more free and easy access and communication and participation with the other dimensions. Well, that's a pretty rich life experience, and that may or may not be. I kind of suspect that may be what is part of the purpose here.
Well, I mean, that's the purpose of the medical procedure she's going under. I mean, later on in the episode, she talks about finding out she has all these. She had to have her hysterectomy. That she had all these medical issues, and I know some people look at that. Well, that's caused from the alien procedures, but maybe they were also studying her to help her. I mean, her mother died of cancer. I had one of my experiences is when I is of being taken and having stuff put into my lungs when I was really, really sick. And I used to be a heavy smoker, and being chided by these beings. I can't see their faces, but they're showing me stuff. They're showing me they're filling my lungs as I'm gagging and trying to get me not to fight it. And they're like, we're fixing you. You know, you're harming yourself. And I woke up the next day, all the horrible sickness and chest congestion was never there.
Yeah.
And I've always wondered, are they healing people?
Yeah, one thing that's come out recently, if you followed the Travis Walton story, his latest comment on what happened to him was, he screwed up. He went too close to the ship. He got hurt.
Yep.
And what he went through on the craft was them actually healing him.
Right, because he was so injured.
Him. That's his latest feeling. So it's
yeah.
It was a negative experience in one sense because he didn't understand what was going on. Positive occurrence because they fixed him from what probably could have been a deadly incident.
Yeah, and
it's like if we capture a wild bird and the animal that's had his wing injured, I'm sure it's pretty frightened as hell as you're trying to fix its wing. You know.
Yeah. And what you just described, Jason, about the the lung things and the discomfort and whatnot, that was almost verbatim from one of the individuals I spoke to back in the early 1990s who
really
having a healing experience, but was very angry because this is hurting me. Why are you doing this? And
yeah, well, it's what they were like putting mental images showing me what they're doing to my lungs.
Yeah.
That's what it was. And I woke up from this again. It's just a dream. It's just a dream, and wrote it off for many years and didn't want to look at it until recently in my life. So somebody else had that kind of experience where they had something going into their lungs?
Yes, almost identical to what you described.
Really? And for me, like I can see their torsos. I can't see their faces, and there's a bright light behind them as they're doing this to me. And there's three of them.
We've heard that before.
Really, I've got my skin is like goosebumps right now. Like
well,
I got chills right now.
If you study shamanism at all, sometimes you will encounter the warning, like when you meet your power animal at some point, you may think you're being attacked. You know, if it's a bear, you may feel like the bear is standing in front of you, ripping your lungs out. What that is your spirit animal is actually healing you. It's a healing experience. So what you fear is not necessarily something to fear, to be feared.
Right.
And that again, that's the same thing that ties in with the UFO experience that Lindsey had.
Well, if you look at Native American cultures, Irish traditions of like fairies and stuff, the stories have been passed down through mythology. You can I mean, Ancient Aliens has done this verbatim, but connect these to almost alien abduction experiences are very similar, and what they're trying to get at in these experiences. But what I'm interested in, you say they're trying to expand the human lifespan to like 150 years or more, and get us to this sixth sense ability, that we all have. I find that extremely interesting, and that would be, why they'd be looking at somebody like Lindsey who has experiences like she has since childhood and her psychic experience. Maybe it's a study of, okay, she's genetically ended up this way, Maybe her whole purpose of being reincarnated is to keep that study going on how they can evolve humans. Was there any evidence of, because a lot of abduction reports also, though, is hybridization, like that she was used in any kind of hybridization program?
Oh, that's where your needles come in.
So what's the needles?
Well, Lindsey always had a suspicion that she had hybrid children, and that some of these encounters was where some of her eggs were physically removed from her body.
Right. Okay, you need a
reinserted, and then after about 3 months, they were removed again. That's a time frame that's often described in the literature, and that's kind of what Lindsey confirmed. So we have a little chapter in there about her hybrid children that based on what one of her favorite aunt, now deceased, was saying, well, yes, Lindsey, you did have this child, and yes, you did meet this child, but you didn't know that you met this child and whatnot. So Lindsey's suspicion apparently has some validity.
I did have a question I wanted to get to. I got somebody on the, let's get to some questions here. I got somebody on the phone line. Zach, hang on. I lost the question. I tried to save it. I think it was James, because I actually had this kind of question too. It was about orbs. James asked what your thoughts were on orbs. Because the reason I ask is I had wonderful guests twice on the show, Chad and Alta Dillard. And when they lived in New Orleans, they wrote a whole book on this called Orbducted. They were abducted, them and another friend, by a big giant blue orb. And I was thinking about that when you were talking about your little blue orb as being a spirit. But people talk about ghost lights and orb. What do you think? Do you think like the orbs that you've seen or anything, could that be some kind of more than just a spirit, but like interdimensional ship like that or something along those lines? Or what do you think orbs are?
The circular shape is a natural shape. I mean, you can look at photographs from the International Space Station or where you're showing fire, and the fire is just an orb of flame. So that's the natural way anything will manifest, is as an orb. That's a three-dimensional circle. So that's very, very kind of swag. Look at the shape of the Earth, look at the shape of the sun. So
right,
that shape is not unusual. Now, the context and what that shape may be, of course, it could be anything. In my particular experience, that orb is the representation of a certain spirit of a certain individual, and the way the camera sees, I don't see the orb, the camera.
Right.
And the camera will present it generally with a bluish hue, and there will be certain textures. So, I mean, it's very distinct. It's unlike any other orbs or things that might be photographed. So the characteristics lend support to that this is what a spirit might look like in a non-three-dimensional moment, even though it's being captured in
maybe
location.
When people actually physically see these glowing orbs, I mean, Rob filmed one tonight we showed on the show just an hour before the show. But maybe some of these glowing orbs are, because we have physical craft and all that, but maybe there's something. I mean, a powerful, highly evolved spirit of somebody could look very powerful, like a big glowing ball of fire, or something along those lines. We could get that's what people are experiencing, because people describe the ghost lights and these orbs as not being ships, but entities.
Let me take that one, Dan.
Yeah, go ahead.
We go down the rabbit holes here.
Yeah, this is a rabbit hole. Yeah. There was a point during the investigation where there was so much information coming in from the pendulums, from the mediums, from general discussion, and just there was just all just falling into place, just click, 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 click. And I just had to step back. My little skeptical self said, "Whoa, wait a minute. This is just too good to be true. Just a minute now. Here we are talking with an extraterrestrial. Here we are getting medium descriptions of very highly evolved spirits, and here we are getting this and that on Lindsey's story, and everything is just fitting together and all." And I said, "Well, wait a minute. Is this really what's going on here?" So I was kind of having that moment.
Right.
Okay. And December 28, 2020, 7 a.m., I'm fresh out of bed, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. I'm a morning person. That's when I'm at my best. Go into the living room, open up the blinds, and let the sunlight come in when the sun rises, and look out the blinds, and there hovering above my neighbor's house across the street is a 20-foot diameter, orangish, yellowish sphere.
Oh.
And I'm looking at that and say, whoa, I'm really seeing this. And it's just there. And I look down below, and there's the street light. And the street light has light pollution bulbs in it, so it's casting kind of an orangey yellow light, very similar in color to the orb that's hovering above the neighbor's house. In the distance, can clearly see the pre-dawn streaks of light of the soon-to-be rising sun. So I have a chance to just examine this phenomenon in great detail. Notice that the circumference is not hard. It's kind of like
Gasoline?
a painter might feather a painting.
Okay. Yeah,
It's got a shimmer to it. So there's a little bit of activity to it. Just
right.
Fascinating. And I'm just taking.
Did it seem alive to you?
Hmm?
Did it seem alive to you?
In retrospect, that could very well be. But what was intriguing was at that moment, after spending several minutes, I mean, it didn't go away. I mean, it was just there.
Yeah.
I would, if it didn't have negative connotations, I would use the word in your face. Okay.
Right.
It was that, whoa, hello, George. You see this? Yes, I see it. So what does George do next? Does he run out to the front door and look at this thing direct? I can grab my iPhone to see if I can get a picture of it. I'll go feed the cats.
Yeah, you know what? I've heard that countless from people.
Yeah, make a cup of coffee, walk back by the window, and by now it's gone, and then kind of click. Whoa, hello.
It's like you have the cop from South Park. Nothing to see here, people. Move along. Nothing to see here, and people move along and go do their theme. Officer Bob Brady. Yes, that's right.
Actually, the phrase in the literature is alien apathy, where someone who has that kind of encounter reacts in a way untypical of what would be expected. And I think that was part of the information being given me was, okay, this is subtle. Now you're allowed to study this thing, but you're not going to get close to it. You're not going to take any pictures, but by golly, you can study it. And we're going to give you a sample of kind of how we communicate. And that's what that moment was. It was absolute, undeniable reaffirmation that everything we were doing in this research project and the book was genuine and real. And let's lose this doubt thing, George. How much more in your face can you get?
It had to show you.
Yeah.
Right, well, I want to get to this phone call before we run out of to our last commercial break here. We got Zach on the line. How you doing tonight, Zach?
I've been better, brother. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm sorry you're not doing great right now. Hope things get better.
Yeah, they will. I feel really bad. I have not seen the Netflix series on this one. With the recent changes in my life, I'll definitely have a lot more free time for sure. But I love hearing everything that's going on. Hey, George. Hey, Dan. How are you gentlemen doing this evening?
Great.
Pretty good. Thank you.
So my first question, it's a multi-part question, is for both of you. In the course of when you were interviewing Lindsey Higgins, did she give any kind of, or did she get any kind of answer about maybe these beings that were in contact with her, where they originated from, or even on the different experiences that she was having? Maybe was it kind of like a mixture of different like locations where these beings came from? Like, say, for example, if one experience she was taken by interdimensional beings, and whereas the other one, it might be extraterrestrial.
It actually gets to a question I want to ask. Go ahead.
Yeah, and do they really go hand in hand with a lot of the spiritual experiences that she had when she was younger?
Yeah, that's for you, George.
Yeah. Lindsey had physical encounters. Okay, she had, touch her body, there it is, physical encounters. But a lot of them were more astral. Okay, did not necessarily involve the physical, but it was more on the spiritual, astral. So there was a whole mix. Very often, when she had some sort of encounter, even if it wasn't a full physical encounter, but it was more of an astral, there would be what Dan would call a calling card. She would have some geometric marks on her body that would show that, oh, okay, we were here last night, and the mark will eventually fade. Or some other indicators that, okay, we were here, we did something, we just want you to know that we did, but everything's in order. So there was both. both as best we can tell. As far as origins, we never pursued that as far as a particular location, planetary, star system, or none of that. And what we gleaned, particularly from our mediums, is that these individuals are so evolved that that's really irrelevant to their experience. They are where they are because that's where they want to be.
One of the things we learned from talking with them is at that evolved level, they can appear pretty much however they want to appear. In other words, they can be like you and me. They can be humanoids, or they can be globes. They can be orbs, whatever. It's they have the ability to do that.
That's what I wondered. Yeah, Zach, kind of you got into the point that I was wondering, because I've heard this from other abductees and contactees, that their experiences sometimes are being physically taken. They end up with marks on them. I myself ended up with a circle mark on my face. It looked like somebody took a cigarette burn to my face, and had I woke up with a big pus on my face, like this perfectly clear gel. I'm like, what is this? I wipe it away and I have a perfect circle on my face. And it healed. It looked like it was going to be a scar or something, but then it healed up real quick. It was the weirdest thing, and I've had other people that have been abducted have these marks. So that's physical, that's there. But then there's other times where just no way it could have been physical, that they were taken astrally. And my shadow person experience was an astral thing. I was being taken out of my body. I know it because he would show me. So that I was going to get to that tonight, wondering, how much of this is astral abduction in a sense compared to physical abduction. It's a little of both, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think it's all of the above. I think it probably depends on what they want to do at the particular time, what is in the best interest of the individual at the time, and they can be physical, or they can be spiritual, they can be astral.
Zach, did you have another question for the guests?
Yes, this question is specifically for Dan. Dan, if someone wanted to create their own pendulum, what crystals would you recommend that they use?
It does not matter. No, one time, true story. One time I went out on a project and I forgot my pendulum. And we were out at, we're doing some psychic research, and I forgot my pendulum. So I went back to my truck, took a pair of tennis shoes, cut the string, picked up a rock off the ground, tied it up. That was my pendulum. It's a rock on a string. If you're going to look for a pendulum, just pick the one that feels comfortable in your hands, one that looks attractive to you, because it does.
I always like rose quartz.
Yeah, a lot of mine are stone, but I have metal, I have plastic, I have wood, I have crystal. I like the ones with the pointed ends because I do looking for missing persons. I do a lot of map dowsing, so I need the pointed end. But it's irrelevant. It's whatever you're comfortable with is the tool you ought to use.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, those are all the questions that I had. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for answering them. I greatly appreciate it. Dan, just one more compliment over to you. I love the hat. So I hope you guys have a good night. And
I like both their hats.
Yeah. Well, I'm not in Arizona. This isn't fashion. This is survival gear.
Yeah.
What part of Arizona?
Central Arizona, Phoenix Mesa.
Oh, I'm over in Mesa myself, so that's awesome.
Really?
Ah, cool.
Yes, sir.
Synchronicities. Yes, Zach is my Arizona man.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Zach, I hope things look up better for you. Oh, go ahead, Dan.
Let me add, Jason, on the orange sphere thing. There wasn't that evening when I was kind of meditating on that whole experience and just realizing it. This is one, real. Two, it's very personal. It's directed specifically to me. And that made me think back on many of the interviews that I had way back in the day, where a lot of the people would say that this was very personal to them. They felt it was very specific to them. And I wasn't quite sure at that time. I mean, we made a log of it and recorded it. But now I understand exactly what they were referring to. And in particular, there was a phrase that summarized that event. And that phrase was diplomatic reveal. And when you think about that particular phrase and that occurrence, that is the perfect description. It was diplomatic and it was a reveal.
They're showing you this is a real thing happening.
Absolutely.
And then you go and feed the cat.
Don't doubt it. Don't worry about it. Get focused on it. Press on.
But I do find it interesting though. You went and fed the cat because that whole way that they do get you to, you said alien apathy or whatever it is, to look at it, oh okay, and go back, you know, and do your thing. It is a weird experience. I had the only big UFO I ever saw was like that. Like the 4 people who were with me, 3 of them completely forgot it within a few days.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I had struggled to hold on to the memory because it was so fuzzy as this huge craft. This thing was like a pillar in the sky, no lights though, and it was just about 600 feet above us over Michigan City, Indiana. Just went downtown Michigan City right over our heads silently, just floated on by and went down. We all looked at it and were like, and we all went home.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And it's like we were all like, what was that? And then we just were like, okay, goodbye. And then
Well, some people
3
can't
out of the
handle
4 don't even want to remember it.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, what are you talking about? Like the thing we saw the other night. You know, it's like the memory is.
Yeah, that kind of occurrence is all over the literature.
Yeah, we joke about it, but George and I have several good friends who are just total disbelievers. Yeah, college educated, university educated, very smart, professional, successful people. But if they saw a UFO drive up in their driveway, they would see a Volkswagen van.
Like a screen memory.
Yeah,
but it's
yeah,
their
they
own
just- well,
doing it
just
to
their
themselves.
Their mind would not accept what they're seeing just because, you know, UFOs don't exist. Therefore, I can't be looking at a UFO. Therefore, it must be a Volkswagen van.
And some people have reactions of terror to it. I mean, my friend just now passed on, Kevin Malik, he saw I think it was an orange glowing orb. I think he saw, if I remember right, out his window one night, and he went and hid behind his couch.
Oh shoot!
And he ended up becoming a MUFON, you know, or his recliner or something like that. My wife's reaction to a UFO, she said, would be to run and hide. That it'd scare the crap out of her.
No, listen, I'm out in the middle of nowhere when I go camping. Yeah, I'm by myself. I said, "There's nobody around here for 10 miles."
My wife's camping right now and listening. Hi,
Yeah, well,
honey.
yeah,
Sleep well.
Yeah. No, I just said, here I am. Nobody's going to know. Nobody's going to see. Show up. You know, we don't have to talk about it. Just show up.
Has it happened yet? Have they showed up?
Yeah. George and I are carrying on a number of experiments. I'm using the Dr. Stephen Greer's technique, meditation, think positive, and invite the UFOs. And on 5 camping trips, I'm 5 for 5.
You know, I've been a critic of Dr. Greer on some things,
Yeah.
evidence-wise, but I'm not a critic of his method. I honestly think it is a good method. Yeah, I honestly, I want people to know this. I've criticized Stephen Greer, but I do enjoy his method of trying, because if these things are so highly evolved, I mean, if you look at the abduction experiences, you can communicate with these things telepathically. So if you really want the contact, what he's trying to tell people to do, I think could work. I don't think it's a bad approach.
Well,
I just have some questions about some of the evidence he's supposedly purported.
I can only speak to what's happened to me, but I've
Yeah.
gone camping and by myself, no lights, no airports, no roads, no towns, no farms, no ranches, just darkness. And I've meditated, done the request, and 5 for 5, I've seen bright lights in the sky exhibiting non-ballistic motion. Put it that way.
And sometimes people feel like these things end up calling them. I mean, for my friend Terry Lovelace, and he was in the 70s, and his incident at Devil's Den, Arkansas. Him and his buddy were in the Air Force and decided out of the blue they had to go on a camping trip. Neither one of them had ever been camping.
Yeah.
And his friend picked this spot, and they go out there, and they get this huge triangle UFO and go through this whole major abduction experience. Involves the military afterwards, and it's a great experience, great book to read, Incident Devil's Den. But we always talk about it's like they were, both of them probably called out there. There's a reason they went out there.
Yeah, and I'm very familiar with the books, and that's where I first encountered the term alien apathy. That was when he was undergoing hypnosis by the whomevers they were, allegedly with the U.S.
Yeah, me and Terry have talked about it quite a bit. He's helped me after reading his book, because I told him, it's like, I don't understand why I didn't look at these experiences. Like, it really took his book to make me think about it. It sent chills down my spine when I first read Incident at Devil's Den, to really look at my experiences. And I didn't look at them as that way. They're all just dreams. And the way I talk about all these other experiences, my shadow person experience, and the, talking to my unborn sister when I was a kid, the green floating head, all this stuff I would openly talk about, think about all the time. But these experiences I would not think about. I would push them away in my mind.
That's one of the reasons we wrote the book. You know, there are people like you and others, and like us and others out there. It's okay to talk about it. In fact, you should go out and talk about it. We encourage you to talk about it.
I think hearing it, like I said, with like Terry's, what really, I mean, I read before, it wasn't affected by Whitley Strieber's communion book. I love it. You know, I love communion. I have a copy of it. You know, there's some things that inked me in it and got me thinking. I wouldn't say that, but it was the camping trip thing that really brought it out for me with Incident Devil's Den, because mine was a camping trip. I think that's what just shocked me into it, thinking about it. But that's what people need to hear, these experiences like Lindsey's and Terry's, because something about it's going to set off a signal in their brain. You know, something that goes, you've been there, you've done that.
And that's
why it's important.
Yeah.
We're going to be coming up on our last commercial break. I do want to get in, Dan, about missing persons. It's something of what you've used in your work for finding missing persons with the pendulum. I would like to know a little bit about your method. And do you try to teach others how to do it too?
Yeah, I've written several books, several how-to books. Mastering the technique is incredibly easy. If you can hold a rock on a string, you can dowse. You can depend on dowsing.
I'd like to talk a little bit about that when we come back from commercial break, because I'm really interested. I experimented with pendulums when I was in my early 20s, and I definitely felt the power of it, that they could be, but then I drifted away from it, and I'd like to get back into it. I've had a lot of psychic experiences, and I'd love to do. Would you guys be ever interested in doing a live presentation of the pendulum?
A demonstration? Sure, demonstration, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not tonight, but I'd love to have you back on the show. If you guys would like to do it, because I like to say the paranormal happens live here.
Yeah. I don't do readings or anything like that, because that's not my calling. But if you want a demonstration of how it works, be glad to do that.
Yeah, for sure, definitely.
I don't do readings.
I understand that.
Yeah,
that's totally fine. But even a live demonstration of it, of its abilities or your communication, I would love to see that. And like I said, I'd love to have live things on the show. That's why we do the live spirit boxes. So we'll continue this conversation for another half hour. We're going to go to our last commercial break, guys. We'll be back, and keep the phone lines open. After we come back from the commercial break, I'll open up the phone lines again. You can call in if you got a question for our guest or want to share your own experience. Feel free to call in tonight. We're always an open forum here. We listen, open minds. This is the place where we can talk about these things. When we come back from the short commercial break.
Intercepted transmission of unknown origin.
Transmission? Out here?
SOS.
Human.
Unknown.
Alien. Certificate X. Exclusive engagement at the Odeon Leicester Square. Now.
Any systematized transmission indicating a possible intelligent origin must be investigated.
In space, no one can hear you scream.
If you are interested in discovering the truth about the paranormal and want to hear from leading researchers in the field, join Justin Brown on his 3 weekly shows named My Paranormal Soapbox, Necromancer Live Show, and the Supernatural Symposium, live on Facebook, YouTube, and InterfaceDeath.net.
This is an Apex Studio presentation.
Hi, I'm Barry, owner-operator of Barry's Barometer Barn. Lately, I bet you've been lying awake at night asking yourself, how many barometers do I really need? Well, at Barry's Barometer Barn, we think you need more than one. Otherwise, we're gonna go out of business. Remember, at Barry's Barometer Barn, we don't know the meaning of high-pressure sales. Come on, folks, buy another barometer. I'm trying to put my kids through college, I've got a family to support, and a secret mistress who isn't cheap.
Visit Barry's Barometer Barn, 000 Storm Drive. Come on, folks, buy a barometer. I'm Barry's older brother, Larry, and every time one of you people walk past the store without coming in, Barry beats me.
This has been a presentation from Tim Morgan's APAC Studio. For more almost professional amateur comic studio content, visit the APAC YouTube channel. Search APAC 2002. That's APAC 2002 on YouTube.
When Alex Gardner is asleep, he has an extraordinary gift. The government wants it, the scientists want it. But to keep it may cost him his life. It might be better if Alex didn't sleep at all. But he cannot resist entering the dreamscape. Can you? See Dreamscape in the West End and all over London now. Certificate 15. It takes an extraordinary adventurer to enter the dreamscape.
Are you intrigued by paranormal talk radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from Talkstream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Join us every Wednesday night at midnight Eastern Standard Time for Weird Wednesday, the live stream, with your hosts Jamie, the Living Dead Girl, and Rob, the Phantom, where we'll talk about all things paranormal, including zodiac, astrology, tarot card and oracle card readings, live ghost boxing and spirit communication, where we'll do Voices from Beyond, the Cold Case Files. So we hope you join us live on Facebook and YouTube every Wednesday night at midnight Eastern Standard Time. We hope to see you there. Bye-bye.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Heat 'em up. Do, re,
You're listening to Paranormal Soup, bringing you the weird every Sunday night. Call into the show and join the discussion. The call-in lines are 219-230-4444 or 260-225-9419. Or by Skype caller ID OOJBland00 or JBland Paranormal Soup. And now to your host, Jason Bland.
Tonight's guests have been Dan Baldwin and George Sewell. We're talking about their Paranormal Pendulum book, Volume 3, about the Lindsey Higgins case that was featured on the Netflix show Haunted. It was from Season 1, Episode 5. Very great episode on there, and a great story that they tell. But the experience is much more deeper than that. You always know, if you're familiar with the abduction cases, and you have any familiar with it, that when you see these shows, there's so much more that's going on. Even people I've interviewed that have been abductees tell me stuff afterwards that's more that they don't even share in interviews sometimes because they just feel like it's too incredible, even though their experience is already incredible. But we got to share these experiences. We've got to really talk about it. And Dan and George have really looked into it. Dan is a pendulum user, and he gets answers, I believe, from the universal consciousness or the realm of whatever the subconscious is able to tap into to give them these answers, and with spirits that are able to manipulate. I've seen a spirit float one up into the air. There's a power to the pendulum, and Dan has also found missing people with it, which I think is incredible. And I want to hear a little bit about that before we leave for the night. But the phone lines are going to be open here. Let me make sure they're open for you guys. You can call in. We can take one more call, maybe two. If we keep it short, and if you got an experience to share, I'd love to hear about it, at least in short tonight. But let's go ahead and get back to our guests. Dan and George, thank you for staying with us for one more half hour here tonight. Again, I mean, these experiences, like I said, go really deep, and I'm great to talk about the Lindsey Higgins case tonight. But I am interested in knowing, Dan, too, about your using the pendulum to find missing people. I think that's incredible. Like I said, if I had the ability or a way to tap into information to help people, that'd be one of the number one things I'd want to do. Because as a parent, I can't imagine a worse hell than your child going missing and not knowing what happened.
Yeah, it's the technique is really basic. I mean, if you can do this, you can hold a rock on a string, you can pendulum dowse. But,
right.
But yeah, I've written a couple of how-to books on it. It's really basic. The technique is easy. You know, you hold the pendulum. You have to ask yes or no questions. A right swing will generally be yes. A left swing will generally be no. And in looking for a missing person, the technique is pretty easy. You know, is this missing person in America? Yes. Is the missing person in the Southwest? Yes. Is this missing person in Arizona? Yes. Is this missing person in Phoenix? Yes. Is this missing person in North Phoenix? Yes. Is this, you know, you can get down.
Keep narrowing it down
to streets. I've gotten down to street addresses. You know, is this person on such and such a street at 12345, 12345 12345 7 Avenue, whatever. You know, and you can basically boil it down to by asking yes or no questions. The other technique I use most often is map dowsing, and you'll take a map. Again, is this person in America? Get an American map. Is this person in this state? Go state by state. Then you get a state map. You know, is this person north of the interstate here, south of the interstate there?
Does the pendulum kind of like swing towards areas too? Like kind of point you towards an area?
Yeah, I would say, like, is this person, for example, in Arizona, is this person north of I-10? Get a yes or no. Is this person east or west of I-17? Get a yes or no. And then looking at the map, I can just pick streets and avenues and basically shrink the area down.
Right.
Yeah, by street or river by river or rock by rock. At some point, you can get down to where you're using topological maps, or even I've used topos, and then I go to Google Earth, and you can get down to basically the size of a football field.
I mean, that's incredible.
The hard part, let me give you an example. The hard part is keeping your mind clear. Example I often use is early in my career, I always get called in. By the time I'm called in, you're usually looking for remains rather than a person, because the psychics are the last one you call in. Yeah, we've tried everything else. Let's give the psychics a try.
Understandable.
So I would ask a question, the obvious question: is this missing person alive? I would get a yes. We would do our work. I was working with a team, and eventually we would find a human body. And this happened over and over again. I would get, is this person alive? Yes. Is this person alive? Yes. Every time, we're coming up with human remains. And it finally occurred to me that the problem was not my talent or anything like that. It was my questioning, because I know there's life after death. So the person I was asking about is still alive. They're just not physically alive on this earth at this time. So I was getting the right answer, but I was misinterpreting it.
So now do you reframe your question? Yeah.
Yeah. So now, is this person physically alive? That's the first question I ask. And then, then it's a lot better after that.
It's like the answer is 42. If you don't ask,
exactly.
ask the right question, right?
Hey, I've doused it. The answer is 42.
And George, I mean, you've worked with him a little bit on some of this too, with missing persons.
Yeah, he's a good dowser.
Now, my wife even, I mean, we experimented. She would even make her own, like, just dowsing rods. I mean, she uses pendulums too. She loves stones and all that stuff, but she'd make her own dowsing rods and stuff. You use the dowsing rods too?
I have, not very often, but we have used them, yeah.
Yeah, and
you can make those out of anything too.
Yeah.
Well, there's a brief chapter in the book where we have a picture of Dan with the rods looking for a buried diary, which, well, you'd have to read the chapter. It's kind of fun. But anyway, so Dan did use the rods to specifically locate where the object was presumably buried, and the circumstances were beyond our control.
We ran into a cement floor.
We needed a backhoe
under the grass.
You didn't ask about the cement floor. You just asked if it was buried.
We found the location. We just didn't find the diary.
What do you think are the limits of the pendulum use? Like, what can it not tell you?
I don't think there are any limits. The limits would be whatever your questioning is and whatever you can handle.
All right, next week's lottery numbers, is it this? That's what I'm saying. Right. No limits.
I've never tried to do that. I think that would be an abuse of the gift. Yeah.
You can't blame a poor fool for trying.
I can give you an example how important questioning is.
Yeah.
You got a minute? Yeah. It's a case where I was right and wrong at the same time. We were looking for a couple missing in an airplane. Their plane went off radar and presumably crashed in northern Arizona. And we were dowsing the locations, and most of us got a specific area in northern Arizona. I got someplace off in Mexico, and I was positive. My pendulum dowsing and my spirit and everything was telling me, you're right. Well, it turned out the ones who were dowsing in northern Arizona, that's where we found the plane and the missing what was left of the missing persons. My problem with Mexico was I was dowsing the plane. I said, my thought was, if I find the plane, we will find the missing persons. So my dowsing was locating the plane. And I was, 1,000 miles off. And I kind of tossed that off. Well, Dan struck out. Well, a friend of mine in the group took the tail number of the plane and just traced the history of the airplane. 10 years before they crashed with the missing person, that plane had crashed in that town in Mexico.
So it was finding the first place it crashed, not the second.
Yeah, I found the place where it crashed, but it had been refitted, fixed, and
the answer is 42.
Yeah, the answer is 42. But in pendulum dowsing, questioning and keeping your mind clear is essential.
Yeah, I would think so. So, what do you do to get yourself ready? I mean, what does your meditation consist of to get yourself ready in that mindset?
It's a very simple process. It's outlined in the how-to books. Basically, I get off by myself. I shut the blinds. It basically shut down any external noise. I wear headphones with very soft, white noise or very soft music. That's not mystical. That's just to keep out the sounds of the kids playing next door. I will dim the lights because I want to focus on whatever map I'm looking at or the computer screen. And I'll meditate for 5 or 10 minutes and then start my work. It's a very simple process.
Do you think if you were more personally attached to what you were searching for or emotionally connected to what you're searching for, it'd make it harder to use your ability?
I would think so in most cases, because I don't douse for myself because I'm too close.
Yeah, that's what I always wondered. It's easier to do this for people that you're somewhat, disconnected from in a sense. Their names, people missing or whatever, but you don't have an emotional connection, so you can detach yourself, get in that state. But it's like if you were trying to search for your own missing kid with it, it might be really hard. Just the emotion would just override you. It's like you have to be able to be somebody separate from the situation.
You have to. I call it putting it in the box. You have to put it in the box because even working some of these cases go on for a long time. I'm still looking for a couple of kids that I've been looking for 20 years. And, that gets under your skin. So you have to be able to put that in a box. Because, when you're doing the dowsing, is this beautiful little 5-year-old girl alive? You want her to be alive. So
right.
Really
that would be my problem. Every time I deal with a child and I ask that question, I want that question to be yes. I can't help that. That want as a parent, just as a human being, you can't help but want that.
That's the hardest part. That's the hardest part.
I bet. Yeah. Cause that's gotta be hard to detach yourself somewhat from that emotion. And I'm sure more often than not in those scenarios, you're getting the answer once you're asking if they're physically alive. You're getting no.
Most
that's
of the
hard.
time, we have found people in trouble and have rescued a few people, but mostly by the time they call in the psychics, it's too late.
Yeah, because they're cold cases. That's when they turn to you. And like I said before, that makes sense. I mean, I have some familiarity with police work, and that I was a police officer for a very short period of time. It's not when you see cops involved with bringing a psychic into investigation, it is a desperate time.
Yeah,
it's past that 48 hours. It's past a couple years usually.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
generally, my experience with beat cops is that they're much more open to it than say the chief of police. The political.
Well, because it's politics. Politics. You can't. Yeah, because Oh, I know. I've talked to a lot of cops who are more open to it than that. I mean, there are people that like to see evidence though, and they like to see things and show me. And if you show them, they're more inclined to believe you. They actually will have an open mind if you show them the evidence, and that's what these psychics I've known have done.
Yeah. I had one deputy. I was out here. We were looking for a missing kid, a murdered kid. We knew he was gone, but I was walking with these two deputy sheriffs, and both of them said, "Look, Dan, we do not believe in this psychic stuff. We don't believe in it. But you guys have come up with information that only we and the killers have." Stuff that only we and the killers have. So we're out here on our day off working with you because you guys have something.
You have something, or you're suspects. It's the truth. It's the truth. They have to look at you now because you've given them information nobody else. It's just the truth of it. It's not to be dramatic, but it is the truth. They have to look into you. They have to look, why do you have this information?
That's why I brought George in, so he can take the blame for me.
It's his fault.
Yeah, he did. George did it. Yeah.
But I think I picture a future if we become more awakened to these abilities, and something as easy as the pendulum, where people could become more awakened just using that. Like I love that you call it like training wheels.
Yeah.
But I don't know if we'd get to the minority report status, but I picture a day where we might be able to use these things to save kids before they're a skeleton in the ground.
Well, I've told
more acceptance
before,
of that.
Yeah. When I've talked to police before, I said, you guys will take information from an anonymous source over the telephone and act on it. Why don't you take information from somebody that has a track record of, actually helping out the police officers already, and give that at least the same amount of thought and concern?
Yeah. I mean, I had a story. I don't know if you caught at the end of my World Wide Web of Weird News segment about a psychic finding a missing dog.
Yeah, heard that.
I mean, in the woods, in a very large woods, after 11 days, you're probably not going to find your dog, and this psychic did.
Yeah, caught that.
I mean, if that was a child, that'd be miraculous. And there are psychics that have found children. I've had them on the show, alive. And if we have this ability, let's tap into it. Do you think it's restricted on predictions? Do you think it can make predictions? I know that's not where your work focuses on, but is it able to predict an outcome, like a child's alive but they will be dead by this date kind of deal, or be able to tell you a future outcome?
I don't like to get into the predictive aspect of it. I have done when I'm looking for a missing person. I use the phrase for example, I was looking for a missing girl from Indiana or someplace up there.
Well, I'm in Indiana.
Who was headed basically to Tucson. And I look at a map and say, well, at some point, she's going to have to be on Interstate 40. So, I asked the question, is it likely she will be on Interstate 40 at this particular date and time? And I got a yes. And so I did, is it likely she will be at this city? Is it likely she'll be at that city? Is it likely she'll be at this city? And actually, I tracked her down to Albuquerque using that technique, but that was very short term in the future, and I wasn't really trying to predict the future.
I believe
probabilities.
I've had my experiences where I've seen stuff happen before it happened. I've talked about it, and I know them on this show about those experiences. So I believe some people, you can see the future, but I've always been the perspective, again, another Star Wars reference from Yoda, is that the future is always in motion.
Right.
Like you can see a probable outcome And if you leave in multiverse and parallel universes, there's parallel future timelines ahead of us. So what road we're going to go down, we don't know. But this is the one you're most likely driving towards. And I think that's my theory about when people, like my experiences of seeing the future is I'm heading down this road. I can see the sign down the road.
Yeah, it is. It's the old butterfly flapping its wings in Africa causes a tsunami over in Jamaica. Once you predict the future and take a breath, you've already began altering the future.
Yeah, butterfly effect. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you know the future now, you can change the future. Yeah. And I've had that experience. That. That's a long story I'm not going to get into, but I've had that experience where I had a dream of something and I changed my future. It was a totally different outcome timeline I saw in the dream if I hadn't made a different choice, and I made the different choice at that time. And I know that what I dreamt would have been that timeline would have happened if I didn't make the choice I did. And that convinced me that these aren't. I had a psychic on here that swore up and down that the future is predestined. Only one really ever said that, but the future's predestined. I didn't. Me neither. I don't buy that because from my experience, it can be changed. The future's always in motion. If you believe in the multiverse and parallel timelines, there's a lot of different possibilities going on.
Well, one of the fundamental characteristics of reincarnating on Earth, if you will, is the fact that this is a planet in a plane of free will.
Right. If it's predestined, then free will means nothing.
A lot of the words, that's what people are choosing. But nonetheless, you cannot stop that process of free will. That's just hardwired into this experience.
Yeah, that was my big disagreement with that psychic. It was that the future's, to me, in motion, because if you didn't have choices, then there is no free will. You're just along for the ride.
Yeah.
I've seen some of those people talking to James in the chat room tonight. He was saying that, wow, I was trying to read some of his stuff, so I got a little distracted. But he was talking about some stuff in the chat room where I was trying to find his comment. Text. Wow. He's got a lot in here. James, I wish I got to reread this, but a lot of stuff is, I think, resonating with him.
Well, good.
Darn it. Campfire first time today I had it. I was looking for the one thing he said that caught my eye. I cannot find it. I hate that sometimes.
Well, while you're looking, I tell people always listen to your instinct because it's not so much predicting the future, but it's sometimes your instinct will keep you from making a mistake.
Yeah. When in doubt, don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. I tell that when people ask me about their experiences, be it ghost, UFO, aliens, or whatever the experience is, and they're trying to figure it out. And I go, what does your gut, if you just had to ask your gut deep down, what do you feel that was? And they'll give me their answer. I go, that's most likely what it is. I think your gut will tell you what the experience is. What do you feel deep down? Just quiet with yourself, and what does it mean to you? And that's what it probably is.
But trust your instincts.
Yeah. Because if it's important and spiritual, there's some part of you that understands it or knows it.
It's also practical. I mean, one time I was driving back from Arizona to Louisiana on a business deal. That's 1,200 miles. And I decided to get up really early in the morning, like around 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to get up and beat all the traffic, and head east. And I was driving through, there was a town to the east of us called Globe. And as I entered Globe, my back of my head was going, go right or go left. Take the highway south, take the highway north, get up to I-40 or get down to I-10. Just bam, 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 bam. I-40, I-10, I-40, I-10. Don't stay on this road. I'll push on through. So 11 miles outside of Globe is a casino where they had a massive wreck. And it tied up all the lanes of traffic. So I'm sitting there, 3 o'clock in the morning, already tired. Okay, so we'll just sit here for a couple hours while they clean the streets. So getting up early and all that, wasted effort. If I had listened to my brain, I would have been 2 hours down the road instead of being just,
Yeah, there's always that little voice that tries to tell you, and sometimes we don't listen.
Yeah.
Luckily, it wasn't detrimental for you. Like it could have been.
Oh, no, it was just a major inconvenience. But if I had listened to my instinct, I would have not have had that major inconvenience.
I'm still reading through James tonight. I wish I could have got to more to the one thing I saw, because he says he posted here in the chat room that he said sorry, but really into the show tonight. I can tell, James, you had a lot going on there. I'd love to hear more about it, but we're almost at the end of the show, so I don't have time for a phone call. But James, call into the show one night. I'd like to hear about your experiences because I was trying to read them during the commercial break, and it's hard to read it all, but I want to hear more what you have to say there, James, on your experiences. That's why I love doing this show, because with Lindsey Higgins' case, with the people I've had call into the show before to tell their experiences, I always feel like we're just getting a little bit more of that little piece of the puzzle of what's going on.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And
I find interesting about it's all connected. That's why I call it Paranormal Soup.
Yeah,
the alien, the Bigfoot, and the ghost in the soup bowl, because I believe it's all connected.
Yes, absolutely.
But what's interesting for you guys is a lot of investigators have to go, or not doing what you do. That you're using an extra. I don't want to call the method of using a pendulum, but you're using a way. It's like you have, like I said, Edgar Casey or somebody you can tap into this collective unconsciousness or to the spirit world, and be able to get these answers that most people are just left with nothing.
One of the real benefits of pendulum dowsing, especially in spirit contact, is you're not depending on hopefully capturing an EVP or getting some kind of knocking on the door or hearing a word. You can have extended conversations with the other side. We've had conversations with ghosts and groups of ghosts, 10, 15, 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm. And they like to talk.
Until they get tired. Yeah.
They like to talk.
Yeah. Or do you think there's anything they were ever prohibited from telling you?
I wouldn't know. I'm not on that. We're not on that side, so we don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I guess you wouldn't know. But I don't know. I guess what I'd say is like you ask a question, they're just not going to answer it.
Yeah, I mean, we're so limited in what we can perceive, so that there's so much information out there, so far beyond that on the spectrum that they can try and show us this, but if we're focused here, we ain't gonna get it, or we'll get it corrupt.
Well, I know you say you don't do readings for people, but I mean, in a sense, that like if you wanted to read somebody from somebody, you would have to get their. Do you think you'd have to get their permission to use it, to get like the read for somebody? Like if you were to read somebody with that or pendulum, like tap into their energy, read who their past lives are, or all that stuff.
If you wanted to read somebody, you wouldn't have to have their permission. I would not read somebody.
Yeah, I got you.
Without asking their permission, because it's none of my business. I mean, I wouldn't go next door and peep in my neighbor's window.
I figured that.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, I just wondered if there's to connect to somebody's energy, you do have to get some kind of permission or connection to them somehow to be able to get that information from somebody.
Well, no, in the case like in Lindsey's case, I mean, you have just sitting down with us, you've automatically got permission.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I wonder about this is that our government, with all the disclosure stuff about UFOs, I'm like, hey, can we bring up the remote viewing program again? You guys really buried that one. Let's talk about that, because I think you're still doing it. If this ability is real, our government experimented and looked into all this stuff. We paid for remote viewing training. If something as easy as a pendulum to get these kind of answers, boy, there's your screw your $1 million satellites. I get my answers right here. You think they ever experimented that? Use it. That's why I wonder about the permission.
I've experimented with remote viewing, and there's something to it, but I find the pendulum more accurate.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, they could. Who's to say our government hasn't experimented if it's that easy? And would they, would it be able to be used for reconnaissance? And that's why I was asking about the permissions.
Of course it is.
So you could use it to be like on a map, or like where's China hiding their secret military complex, and could find it. And remote viewing is interesting. In fact, is people could draw pictures of locations and give them details about stuff.
Well, yeah, the thing about that is you can draw a picture of, let's say, a missile base someplace. You got a perfect picture of a missile base. Well, where is that?
Right.
With the pendulum, you know exactly where it is.
Yeah, with a remote viewer, they're actually given the coordinates of a place they want to look at, but they can't tell them the coordinates of the place, to go. So this, maybe both working together. See, that's what I think. We got to explore these things, because we could tap into a whole investigative way of espionage or criminal investigations with this.
Well, that's we proved that with the Lindsey Higgins book, because the more people we got, especially with the pendulum, additional pendulum dowser and our additional mediums, the more people we got, the more information we got, the more validation we got.
Actually, I was interested in that question before we end, too. You have other pendulum users. When you guys work together, do you do your own separate readings and then come together and put your information together then?
All of the above.
Yeah.
All the above? Yeah. Because I would think that'd be really interesting. Is like, I said, the let's say a missing person, the body's here, and you come back and you say, yeah, it's here. You both did that separately.
Yeah. And sometimes, normally we're all around the table together, but sometimes just to make sure, for example, George and I will face away from each other so that, I'm not looking at his pendulum. He's not looking at my pendulum.
That's what I mean.
The medium will be looking another direction so she doesn't read our body language or see the pendulums. And we still get consistent answers.
No, I think that's perfect, finally. And maybe, being in a vicinity together and your combined energy will help you all be maybe more connected.
Yeah. The combined energy is a big factor. That's why we like to have our sessions with a number of people, because it's amazing. Once the momentum gets going, they'll start asking questions Dan and I would never think to ask. And it just enriches the whole dialogue. So
I think that goes for any kind of like spiritual experience. The more people involved,
absolutely,
the more powerful it is.
Well, when you tap in, you got a greater collective energy, so you're going to have more information downloading, so to speak, or certainly accessing.
Now, before we run out of time, what are I don't think I ever shared. What's your guys' website? Do you guys have a website?
For me, it's real simple. It's just www.george add that middle initial, George Sewell, SEWELL.com. If you don't add the initial, you're going to get some artist in New York City. He's a fine guy, but it ain't me.
And for you, Dan?
It's me. It's www.fournightspress.com. That's FOURKNIGHTS press.com or www.danbaldwin.com. And my email address is on the website.
Now, what do you guys do? You have a Paranormal Pendulum 4 book coming out soon?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
What's that going to? Can you give a little hint of what that book's going to entail?
Take it, George.
What you're looking into?
We're going to follow a little item that kind of cropped up in Paranormal Pendulum 3, where we kind of bumped into the sky people. And when you
like
look
the Native American sky people?
Yeah.
You look at history, legends, creation stories from indigenous people around the world, and we're focusing primarily on North America. There are always references to interactions with the sky people. So,
multiple Native American tribes.
Yeah. Who are the sky people?
Yeah, George is he's in Mound Builder Central, and I'm in Cliff Dwelling Central out here. So we're getting
perfect.
Yeah, two entirely different cultures.
Well, that's it for the show, guys. When that book comes out, please email me. Let me know. I'd love to get you guys back on the show. I'd love to talk about it.
Absolutely.
And then maybe we could do the like a live demonstration of you using the pendulum.
Anytime.
All right, guys, you were awesome guests tonight. Truly enjoy you. We're going to have to do this again for sure. But that's it for the show, guys. We will be back. Thank you, guys. Check out their book, Paranormal Pendulum, 1 through 3 volumes. The third one is the one we were talking about tonight with Lindsey Higgins' case from Netflix. I'd love to have Lindsey on the show. If she's ever interested, let me know. Love to talk to her, too. But, guys, we're wonderful. We will be back next week to talk about near-death experiences with Dr. Scott Taylor. Next week, same bad time, same bad channel, 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Central, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Pacific time. Thank you to everybody who shares out the show on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. Keep telling your friends about Paranormal Soup, the open place forum for us to discuss the weird, the strange, and unusual without any judgments, and a great chat room community to help you get along through it if you're all new to this paranormal weird stuff, right? You guys are great in the chat room. Thank you so much. Thank you, Russ, tonight for your $20 donation on Super Chat. You can always donate on Super Chat or YouTube to help pay the bills. We're also on Patreon under Jason Bland Paranormal Soup. $2 a month, $5 a month, whatever you can donate will help pay the bills for these shows. All right, guys, have a great night. See you next week.